where we wait for live stream to tell us that we are live. And I believe we are indeed live. Welcome, everyone, to Chris's Speaker's Corner. I have two very special guests for us tonight and a little bit of backstory about how I encountered these guys. We have Pastor Greg Armstrong with us, who will be presenting his own way of doing what I consider to be the Islamic dilemma, but in a really interesting way. And it kind of like takes a new approach that I think is often underlooked, if ever used, especially in our circles. And when I came across him speaking, I was very impressed. And so I thought, I've got to get this guy on. I've got to have a chat with him because I think it'll be very edifying to my audience. And we have Sharik. Sharik. I will get there. I will eventually get there, I promise.
Of course. You will.
We have him here tonight with us as well. And it was your video, I believe, that I saw with you and Pastor Greg when you were talking about the Islamic dilemma. And it was really interesting. So what I would like to do is just hand it over to probably you, Pastor Greg, first, just to explain who you are, how you got into evangelism with Muslims, and Jed, what is this master key approach that you have to giving ministry to Muslims?
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris, for hosting us. Just really honored to be on your channel, and it's awesome just seeing all the ministry you do at Speaker's Corner, and I'm sure beyond there as well. So, we're here for iron sharpening iron, right? We can learn from you too, so it's not just like a one-way thing. In terms of for myself, I'm a pastor, a church planter. I served in a pastoral role for a number of years. Let's say, I'm in Canada, by the way, kind of the Toronto area. And, I was serving in ministry for a number of years as a youth and young adults pastor at a larger church. Compared to the churches where Sharik is, they're not very large here.
Right.
But in Canada, we're kind of like, I like to say, we're about 10%. Well, we're higher now because of ridiculous levels of immigration, but we're about 10% the population of the U.S. So everything is about like 10. This is about like a tenth. So a big church here is like 1,000, whereas a big church in Sharik's area is probably like 10,000.
Yeah, easily.
And more. So anyway, the point is I was at this church for a while, and it was a great opportunity to serve. But I just really felt like stuck in not being able to use gifting and skill sets and knowledge I had especially in the area of apologetics and trying to reach out to people who are from non-Christian backgrounds. So I just felt the Lord leading myself and my wife to step out to plant and to do church and ministry a bit differently, more missional focused. So we have a focus more on reaching unreached people groups in our region, and that includes, it includes Muslims, not limited to Muslims, of course, but we do have a big focus in outreach ministry, at least at this stage, on connecting with the Muslim community and sharing with them. And so actually for why we do things this way, which is the method we call Master Key, was actually developed by a friend of mine, Alex Karimli. And I would say and give a shout out to him and, follow his channel too. Kerimli is his last name. It's Alex Karimli is the channel name too. So you can see some of me on there with him. So Alex basically did street evangelism for a number of years in Toronto. I think he started after 9/11, and he's a bit older than me. I don't want to say how much older. So he was doing it for a number of years, and he just found so frustrating when talking to Muslims, feeling like you can't get anywhere. And so after some years and just really starting to dig into the Quran, he started seeing, and I think this really ties in with the Islamic dilemma stuff, is what it says about the previous scriptures. Sorry for sniffling, I got congestion. But yeah, so he one day he went home and he typed into his computer a browser on the Quran, Torah, and he found all this stuff in the Quran, and it's all this time he's being told by Muslims they don't accept the previous scriptures, they're corrupted, And then he's reading the Quran and it's saying the exact opposite. And so that kind of started his process of developing what became the master key. And so basically the master key, well, I won't get into all of it right now, but the foundational, the first pillar of it, we like to say 5 pillars, and we call them the real 5 pillars of Islam. And the first one is that the Bible's been corrupted. And in particular, because of what we do, we focus on Old Testament, not New Testament. So Torah. So that would be the Torah is corrupted. So we start with there. What does the Quran say about that? And then we build on it, because the issue is like, what is the contradiction between the Quran and the Torah? And that's essentially the rest of our methodology, which explores that. So over some time, he discovered these other pillars, and he built it kind of systematically. So he'd have a step-by-step approach, and he found like it worked. Like Muslims didn't have like anything to say, and they'd be in shock. And so I met Alex in 2019, which was shortly before I was deciding around that time to step out to plant, like to plan to do that. So we came across paths through a mutual friend, and he introduced the master key to me, and I started learning it. I thought like when I heard it, this is it, like this is the way to go. But it took me a long time to really learn it, to internalize it. And then for myself, Shara can probably speak to this. I'm pretty thorough with the stuff I do. I try to be. So try to.
You seem to be.
Yeah.
From what I've seen.
Right. So he Shark, he just told me he almost finished the full 2 lectures, and I just sent it to him yesterday. So
amazing.
They're like 3.5 hours each. So yeah. So anyway, I basically over the next 2 to 3 years kind of learning it and also engaging in the Muslim community along with Alex and some others. And we would set up these dialogue, we call them dialogue circles in masjids. And we would meet and we would basically compare stories, because that's the essence of our approach is comparing stories. But it looks a bit different in a masjid context. We're not like pushing them and stuff. But that was like a really good training ground for me, interacting with them on their turf and seeing how they respond to things, and essentially trying to find like what do they not have any answers to, and how can we essentially steel man their side so that we can anticipate where they're going to go and still get beyond that and hopefully have the most optimal persuasive approach. Right.
So
I basically developed that over the next few years further, and that's, I count it as my own too now.
Nice. Yeah. So what I pick up from that in particular is you emphasize the Torah. So this is something I feel that we're kind of guilty of over here, over the pond in England. When we give our responses to Muslims, we tend to focus a lot on the Injil, focus a lot on the Gospels, and I think it's because, one, we feel like that's where we want to get them to in the end anyway. We want to mention Jesus. We want to get them into the gospel and then defend it while kind of presenting it. And I've long kind of had this back and forth in my head as to whether that's actually the best way, because, the Quran talks a lot more about other prophets, right? You mentioned in your talk, in one of your talks, that, Moses is spoken about a lot more than Jesus is. And then you have like Abraham and you have Noah. And when you actually come to like how many times the Quran really does anything with the Gospels, it's very few. In fact, basically almost, I'm tempted to say none of Jesus's ministry is really even there. And if it's there, it's presented in parables or paraphrasing parables and things like that.
And if I can ask you something, if you think about it. So when you think of the stuff that's in the Quran about Jesus and John the Baptist, like New Testament characters, Mary, what is parallel in there with the 4 Gospels?
Yeah, there is some things. So Surah Al-Miriam, Surah 19, Ayah 1 to 10, is basically what you find in Luke chapter 1 in terms of Zachariah and his son John the Baptist, as we would say, but Yahya for them. you can find, I think it's in
Very
Surah.
strange, though, right?
It's very strange. I mean, this is me,
Yeah.
like, I'm following like Gabriel Reynolds,
Yep.
and also some others who have commented on this. So they do exist, and I use them to I make the identity of the Injil a priority for me. I think it's key to be able to show Muslims that we're actually talking about the Injil being Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John at a minimum. And I actually think it's also other things from the Quranic perspective, because it quotes from Proto-Evangelion of James. It quotes from probably the Arabic infancy gospel, probably. And for that reason, I think it's not just Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But it's clear to me that you can find enough in it to be like, you got that from this source originally. So therefore, that is what the Quran author thinks the Injil is. And I do the same with the Torah, right? But with the Torah, it's almost not even in question.
Yeah.
Really, because I mean, how many times can you hear the same story of Moses throws his staff down and it turns, there's a lot of things that are repeated that are obviously found.
That story's all messed up too.
Oh, absolutely.
And
but
we know it's talking about that.
But we know, right? Like it's a question of identity. We know that the author's trying to mention that. That's what he's getting at. But of course, we think that the author has made errors. It's not the same author, right? We think that the Torah's author ultimately is God, but what the Quran seems to think the Torah is something different. Before we continue, actually, Sharik, I'm aware that I have like kind of sidelined you a little bit in there. Do you want to give a brief introduction to what you do and how you fit in with all this?
Of course, yeah. So I run this social media evangelism ministry, and we had a lot of reach, a lot of conversation with Muslims, and I was, being a former Muslim myself, my heart is just on fire for it. Actually, I'll probably cover his face here, but my iPhone background is my dad at in Mecca, and people ask me why I'm so tweaked out all the time. It's because I look at that all day, right? But my heart is just so on fire for that world, and they're so just powerful, when they come to Christ. And when I found Christ, I got lit on fire in ways that people see me and they're like, "You've only been a believer for how long?" And I just think there's so much power behind that. And I think the Muslim world is a huge part of the Maranatha play. I really do. And so I just kind of laid everything down, and I was like, my parents came back from Mecca, and I was like, I'm going to devote my life to this. I don't care. Like, I'm going to either find the truth or die trying. And so I ended up having this group come up, our school community right here, and it was growing really fast. And I was looking for the way to like evangelize to Muslims. And that's when the Lord put Pastor Greg in my life. Literally the day we started it, Pastor Greg like slid in my DMs, and he's like, "Hey, I have this master key strategy." And I'll kind of skip some of the meat and bones there, but really what happened was I learned the master key, and I thought, this is phenomenal. Like, this is insane. Nobody's talking about this. It takes the Islamic dilemma, and in my opinion, just takes it just so far in a steelman, a respectful way. And I fell in love with it. And now it's something that I want to champion. It's something that I have my full conviction with. And just to kind of land the plane there, I actually had a conversation with my dad about the master key system. And it's usually such like an emotionally volatile conversation, like very emotional, very theological based, very New Testament Injil, which, my dad will die on the hill that the Injil was revelation to Jesus, not like the teachings of him. And so we just don't have it. And so my theology about original sin and the Trinity and nothing, like, it didn't matter to him. And when I brought the master key to his attention and we just focused on the Torah, the conversation completely changed. And so what was usually an emotionally volatile, very head-butting conversation, which I know we can definitely see, it was actually solved with the master key. And my dad is still, he's still Muslim, but it started a new level of conversation that was very respectful, because you have to truly understand the scriptures, and it starts with the Old Testament for sure. And so I'm just here to really support Pastor Greg. I think he'll be doing a lot of presenting on this because he's my mentor and teacher too. Definitely the subject matter expert on this. But I'm just here to say I absolutely love this, and to, of course, just engage with you guys. It's an honor to be here too.
Hey, I think it would be good if you mentioned something about Muslim Fest too.
Yes, absolutely. So I went to Toronto Muslim Fest about 3 weeks ago.
Muslim Fest. That's an interesting name.
Yeah. Talk about frontline evangelism, right? But in the greater Toronto area, I'm from the southern US, so I always joke that I flew across countries to go there, although it was a pretty short flight. it was my first time doing real Muslim evangelism, not just online with my brand, but also engaging some of the most devout dawah guys that I've met in my life. And they have huge dawah tents. There's probably 15,000 Muslims that weekend going in and out of this festival. And they set up shop in the middle of Mississauga in the square. And it was unreal. It was unreal to see that much community and power from the Muslims in one area. And it reminded me of home, honestly. I was like, wow, like that's what would happen if we had thousands of us. And this was the first time that I had learned the master key. I was like, okay, I'm ready to try this out on a street evangelism, no references, no chat GPT, like face to face with these guys, you know, speaker corner style, honestly. And it worked. And so within 30 minutes of me engaging a dawah booth, I had 15 dawah guys around me in a circle. The head of iEra Canada was, you know, he got the camera crew out, the microphones out. And I was able to hold my ground with very aggressive dawah guys coming at me, just because I stuck to the basic principles of the master key. And in 30 minutes, I climbed the ranks, I'd like to say, where I had some of the head debaters of that area, of the Greater Toronto area, like personally texting me saying, hey, Shark, I heard you're in the business of debating Dai. Like, let me know. We'll do whatever it takes to get you on a debate panel. Like, let me know. And I was like, well, I'm actually not here to do that. But it's crazy that the conviction that the master key gave me, you know, I'm very, very new into apologetics, but the conviction that the master key gave me to like climb the ranks in that sense, it only made my conviction so much stronger. And now it's actually the only thing I think people should, and I'm pretty radical in my belief with this, but I think it's the only thing we should be using for Muslim evangelism. And I'm a very heavy proponent of that. And a lot of my growth in, you know, the online space, which is definitely a wave of the Lord, has been because I talk about the master key. So it was a very special interaction, I think, over there in Toronto, being at Muslim Fest. I had the confidence to go right up to devout dawah guys, shake their hand, and be like, hey, I'm an apostate, let's talk, and then hold my ground.
That's brave of you.
It was brave.
Yeah.
I bought a fake beard in a disguise, and I was like, PG, Pastor Greg, I'm not even going to use it, man. Let's just go. Let's run the play. So, yeah,
nice.
It's a very interesting tool, and I've only learned it a few months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know honestly, the first time I heard of the master key was from this video, and it was really interesting because Pastor Greg, the way you presented it showed me that you knew what you were doing. You had presented this before. You had experience. And I thought, this is a guy that is kind of like a parallel to us in the sense that, you know, we're doing evangelism here in London in Speaker's Corner with large percentages of the population being Muslim, like Pakistani Muslim or Bangladesh or from that kind of region. And you mentioned that very similar where you are near Toronto. And it's kind of like, a lot of similarities between us. And I think that's why your perspectives are very, very valuable here. I remember you in this, because again, I'm speaking about a presentation that you have online, and I watched it earlier today, and you go through basically what you're going to talk through here, but like even more in depth. And I'll probably link to that presentation in the description down below for anyone who's watching after this live, so people can watch it. But one of the things you mentioned was you have set principles that you start off with, right? So the first one I think is something like you're not here to be like disrespectful or, you know, overly aggressive or like way too emotionally passionate. You're there to be calm, relaxed, you're respectful, and you engage in a fair dialogue. And you also mentioned it's key when you do this kind of evangelism and you're presenting these arguments to Muslims that you do it from like you're strongmanning their position, right? We're not just presenting a weak form of Islam to knock it down and be like, ha ha ha, look how, you know, clever we are, but rather you say, no, we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt, make their case for them the best we can, use their scriptures, use their scholars, and then demonstrate like at the very heart of it, right? Which is why you say like the pillars, you know, you have these 5 pillars you want to destroy, these 5 pillars you want to build. And so it's at the very core of it. And that's what I find really, really interesting. So I'm going to probably pass over to you, Pastor Greg, just to kind of work into this this approach you have, the master key approach. And I probably will butt in a little bit every little bit because I may have some questions or some comments. But yeah, why don't you take it away?
Yeah. Thanks so much. Actually, I shared my screen if you want to accept it.
Yeah.
And it shows the principles that you're mentioning. And that is important, actually, that we should mention them. I don't want to spend too much time on it because there's all the good stuff is the actual method. But just to kind of understand where we're coming from, right? Is so, you know, essentially in summary, these are major principles we use to be respectful. You know, like I often say, it should be a given because we're commanded to do it according to scripture. But in my experience and a lot of stuff I do see online, I don't think I've ever seen you do that though, Chris, which I appreciate, is there is a lot of like disrespect. I don't agree with mocking. And I would put that in that category. So that's another, you know, that's a topic in itself. But 2 is be open to correction. So when we're talking with Muslims, like be open to, like, you might get something wrong. And, you know, I don't portray myself as an expert. I never make that claim about myself. If somebody makes that claim about me, that's on them, not me. But, you know, I'm an outsider to Islam, and I always say that. So I can never, you know, pretend like I'm in their community, hearing from their people all the time, growing up in it. I didn't go to an Islamic school, right? So I'm an outsider. Doesn't mean we can't learn stuff, but we can make mistakes. We might not have the full perspective on stuff. So, you know, when we're going through it, we have to be open to being corrected. Doesn't mean they're always right at the same time. But number 3, never misrepresent the other side. So I never want to misrepresent them or strawman them. And I do think actually a lot of the arguments I have seen from a lot of guys online that are pretty popular, I do think there are a number of things that are based in misrepresentations. And the next point also, uncharitable interpretations. So I like to tell people, don't go on a fault-finding mission when you're reading the Quran and Islamic sources. Don't just look for everything wrong, but try to actually understand it first and foremost, and do it like, I like to say, it's like pretend as if you were a Muslim and you believed it as you read it, so that when you see something that seems like an apparent contradiction or something that seems like a immoral thing, try to imagine how you would try to defend it and harmonize it. Okay, so don't go on and I say, like, I think I have it. Yeah, number 7 is no double standards, right? So, you know, I don't want people when I'm inviting them to read the Bible. If they're reading the Bible, like let's say it's a skeptic, and they're just trying to find everything wrong with the Bible. You know, I don't want them to do things that way. If they find an issue, that's fine. They find an issue, but like, we would hope that they would not immediately accept it, but actually explore it, see if there's answers to it, ask questions, talk to somebody who's knowledgeable in our community. So similarly, I would want to talk to somebody knowledgeable in their community. I'd want to listen to their lectures and so forth, read their sources. Number 5, okay, don't strawman, but steelman. So that's what you were talking about earlier. We want to essentially represent what are we critiquing when we're critiquing Islam. I don't want to just critique, let's say, an extreme version of it or just one sect either. I want to critique basically the best that they have and focus on the issues that are common to all. So the Master Key is designed on that basis. So, you know, it is applicable to Shia, Sunni, Ahmadiyya, whoever we're talking to, because it's talking about foundational issues that they all share. And we try to anticipate how they will answer. So we don't just throw an argument out there, not anticipating what they say, not looking at answers that they give. But you know, it doesn't mean that we have always found it, or we've anticipated everything, but might as well try our best. And I like to say, you know, when you're talking to Muslims, like, we know this is a reality, and I know you don't know, Chris, like when you're talking to Muslims and they don't have an answer to what you're bringing up, and the conversation ends and they go home, where are they going to go next to try to find answers? Where do you think, Chris?
They're going to go to their Dawah guys, go to their mosque, go to their imam, the sheikh, Islam QA, sources like that, I imagine.
Exactly. So are there answers on those websites? Are there answers among those people on those issues? And often there are. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to say, does it mean that you and I accept those answers as always valid? No. But the question is, are the answers good enough for the Muslim to still hold on to Islam. Okay, because ultimately, number 8, our goal is to persuade Muslims. Okay, so a lot of Christians actually don't believe in this. Like, I don't know about you. I don't know where you are theologically. I'm not a Calvinist. Okay, so being not a Calvinist, I don't know if that's totally relevant, but in my experience, Calvinists and often charismatics often are kind of like, they really just rely on the Holy Spirit doing stuff.
I believe there's a synergy between well, the Holy Spirit working within us and our own action. So
Okay.
it's not enough to think that like you could just sort of be passive and make an argument that you ought to do nothing because the Spirit will just somehow bring it about. I think there's a synergy at play there.
And even for Calvinists, they say God works through means as well, and we're commanded to reason with them from the scriptures and so forth. So but my point is that just I often find, for whatever reason, there are a lot of Christians from different schools of thought who often don't press into enough, I think, into the argumentation and into reasoning and trying to actually persuade them. Now, I believing in free will, that people can make a choice one way or another. So I can't make them make a choice, obviously, but I can tear down all the barriers as much as I can to leave them no excuse, to the point that they can see that they have no excuse. That's my aim. And then they can make a choice. And if they choose to reject, that's up to them. That's between them and God. And I'll leave that with them. And, we can talk to other people. So, but the goal is to persuade Muslims. And that also means we're not aiming to persuade Christians. So there could be Christians watching this who think it doesn't make sense, whatever I'm doing. And honestly, I don't care. So all I care about is reaching Muslims. Christians already believe Islam and the Quran are false. Okay, so we can go through Aisha argument. We can go through, whatever ethical issues. We can go through theological argumentation and all of this stuff, which we don't do any of that in this methodology. So if people want to do that, that's up to them. But that, I think, is mostly more persuasive for Christians that Islam is false. It's like another reason why I don't believe in Islam. And, we can list all these reasons. But those reasons, are they generally effective and persuasive with Muslims? And I don't find them to be. So that's my kind of basis for my criterion for evaluating it, is really seeing the effect it has in conversation with Muslims. And again, it doesn't mean they all convert. Okay. But normally with other things, I often find it doesn't go anywhere. We really butting heads, and they walk away often feeling more confident. And that's not what we want. We don't want them feeling more confident. So at least if we can give them something that there's no good answer to, and that gets them really thinking, and hopefully they'll follow through and search, and maybe we'll have more conversations. So I would love to,
real quick, Greg, I would love to double down on that point. Like the ability to have a system like this where you can run it the same way every time and avoid the theological, the ethical, the moral critiques. Something that I see a lot all over the internet now. But being able to avoid that really sets a level of respect with the Muslim world that it changes it into a completely different conversation from the start. And it also cuts out 95% of the symptom arguments, and this will help you get to the root cause. And that was a lesson that I had to unlearn in my brain. I had to really unlearn how to avoid the theological original sin, Trinity, Jesus is the Son of God, the ethical stuff especially. Not even mentioning it has made evangelism so much easier.
Yeah. Another thing to say about the difference between, and this is relevant for the Islamic dilemma if you're going to use Injil and New Testament, though I would differ on using that. But that's but on the point I'm going to make is, at least both of those, we're trying to use Scripture, right? We're trying to use the Bible, Old or New Testament or both, where we're trying to lead them out of Islam into the Bible, and we're using the Bible to do it. Whereas if we're using a moral argument theological is different, but I don't find that ever persuasive to Muslims. But the ethical stuff, it doesn't automatically, like, what's the transition between that and the Bible? Like if I'm arguing about slavery, well, I mean, there's a problem there too, because slavery's in the Bible too, right? Now, of course, we can say, well, but our slavery is not like your slavery, right? And that's fine. Okay, but the question is the Muslim going to be persuaded by that, right?
So one thing I will jump in with is, and this is kind of what I have in my mind when I saw your stuff, is I can see this being incredibly effective in the way that you present it in a conversation with one or more people who are willing to listen. Usually with Muslims, or if with any group really, it's a lot easier to have conversations when it's just one-on-one, because as soon as you introduce more people, you get crowd dynamics, and crowd dynamics tend to evolve into who is the most confident, who is the most who could say the quickest response, who can, that kind of thing. And Speaker's Corner, that's a lot of it, because ultimately it's like people go there to fight, sometimes even physically fight, so
and you and I were talking about it yesterday a little bit, and what I was mentioning to you, and I think it's good that you brought this up, is this methodology is designed for talking to people. So it's not like it's designed for the street, talking to a person, and it is generally one-on-one. Okay. Now in a group dynamic, and it happens, like sometimes I'm meeting with I do this mostly in meetings. Like people ask me for videos and things. Well, I have private meetings with people. I'm not going to put a camera in our private meeting. Okay. So that's mostly what I'm doing. Like probably there'll be more videos over time as I engage more in street stuff. I don't do that much though. So at least I haven't yet that much. So, but the point is, when you're with one or even a small group of people in that kind of meeting setting, like you're there to meet, you're sitting down, that's different than a Speaker's Corner context. But Speaker's Corner, what I would say is you're going to have less amount that you can share, because there's interruptions, there's all of that stuff. And I know that too. But so that's a question. I would just say, when you master this material, then it's a matter of, the stories really well, how to compare them, what things you can bring out and use, and you just adapt it to the situation where you're making certain points, certain comparisons, and you're challenging them on that. So that's what I would do in that kind of setting, because you're not going to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and even more, which is what I usually do with people. Okay, so yeah, it has to be adapted.
I have some thoughts on how I might go about doing that. Some initial thoughts, right? Which is kind of along the lines of what you were saying.
I would love to talk to you about that more.
Yeah, break it down.
Yeah, well, so you mentioned, I mean, what's exciting for me is you show like stories in the Torah, right? Whatever that might be. I don't know, Noah and the flood or whatever. And then you contrast this with what we find in the Quran, and you point out there are substantial differences, but it's clearly the same story, or at least it's clearly meant to be the same story.
That's right. So
we have identity established, but we know that there's substantial differences. And again, back to what you were saying yesterday, they're not minor enough that they can be explained by scribal errors, or like someone just made a mistake somewhere and that's why there's this little difference. No. They're actually retellings of the story where there are details that are changed, and that must be intentional. And if that's intentional, so we can establish a few things here. The Quran talks about the Torah. The Torah has the same story told in what we have today and in the Quran, but the Quran has differences, and those differences are intentional. The Quran confirms that Torah as being true, particularly its stories of prophets. How do we do this? So the basic thing is to say, well, this seems to be that the Quran is false because it's been unable to correctly relay the story that we find in the Torah, which precedes it and is contemporary. And now this is where it gets very exciting for me, because I know Muslims very well, and I know how they respond to these sort of things. They say, well, Chris, what you need to understand is the Torah has been corrupted.
Mhm.
You know, people have edited the Torah over time. It's not the exact same thing that was given to Musa. What was given to Musa was an Islamic Torah that is exactly the same as the Quran today in terms of the stories, the contents. But now, and at the time of Muhammad, all that you had was partial bits and pieces, but a good chunk of it was taken out, and therefore it's not reliable. You have to take it with a big pinch of salt. And ultimately, the Quran is a criteria over that book. So you should just judge by whatever the Quran says. And you mentioned to me, you said, well, we can have methodology to kind of establish why would the children of Israel alter their own scriptures intentionally. And of course, we can actually look at this even like as a bigger thing. You know, they're not just altering one copy of the Torah; they'd have to alter significant copies of the Torah across the Jewish diaspora. I mean, it seems also like they'd have to have cooperation with Christians at some point. But anyway, it is a massive job. Why would they want to do that? What would be the gain? And you laid out a set of criteria, and you said, is it a theological point? Did they change the Torah for theological reasons? And then you can look at all these stories, and you're going to go into some of that later on. And you can be like, well, it doesn't seem like this is theological. This doesn't seem to have anything to do with theology in this story. Okay, well, is it a moral reason? Is it an ethical reason that this story was changed? And you think, well, a lot of this is quite benign. You know, it's substantial, but there's no radical change in ethics here, so it doesn't seem to be for that reason.
Yep.
So is it for a political reason? And again, you think, no, it doesn't seem to be for a political reason. And then you're ultimately left realizing that there is no actual heuristic that you can employ to actually explain why anyone would alter these stories from the original Quranic perspective to this the corrupted Torah's version. There's just no reason logically to do that. It doesn't seem to make sense. And I think then when you present all the data, it just piles on. And I can imagine as a Muslim, you'd just be sitting there thinking, how on earth can I explain why the children of Israel made all these changes? Like,
Precisely.
you know, like changes to the story that, you know, like someone didn't travel somewhere or someone did travel somewhere, and it's like,
or how old they were, or
how old they were,
the sequence of events,
all these things that are
everyone.
substantial, but why would, you know, they don't seem to be like there for any kind of reason.
Exactly.
You would ultimately just have to be like, well, they corrupted it for the sake of corrupting it, which of course at this point you're kind of like, well, that's absurd. Like, why would I believe that the children of Israel knowingly and intentionally and uniformly corrupted their own scriptures for what seems to be no apparent reason? And I think that's where the actual meat of this comes in. Or at least that's what I thought was incredibly well articulated. And I think there's a lot of things to gain from that have not been explored and have not yet been presented in the field of apologetics. And that's why I'm very, very excited about this. Just from that point alone, actually.
I appreciate it, Chris. And honestly, I'm biased, but I think you're right. But no, I think it's quite obvious. Nobody's talking about it. The things that people talk about are all the same examples. Mary and the sister of Aaron. Haman is in the wrong times in the time of Pharaoh, and they're building the Tower of Babel, right? Like, of course, those are crazy things, but they have their answers. And again, like I said, we don't necessarily accept their answers. We're going to plead with them to say that doesn't make sense, and they're going to stick to their answer, and they're going to still be Muslim. So the question is, what else is there? Like, we're gonna trod the same ground for which Christians have been doing since John of Damascus, right? The same issues. He talked about Mary, the sister of Aaron. So we're going to go all the way back to 730 and haven't learned anything. So let's expand on it. And so I would say what I agree with about the general idea of Islamic dilemma is it's recognizing the Quran does affirm the reliability of the previous scriptures. But like you said, and you were talking about we have to have the identity first. And I think that is the big obstacle for Injil. Okay, so that's why one of the reasons we don't use Injil is because you've got a big hurdle for establishing identity. Secondly, what are the examples we're going to use in the Injil? Like we talked, it was great that we were talking about it earlier. You pointed out, well, like you can think of the example, maybe Luke 1 parallel, but it's not like much else.
Yeah,
And
well, the problem is that there are some things you can say are just happenstance. There's a German scholar who did an entire book where he lists everything out, and there's a lot, but there's a lot of it that you look at and you think, okay, but you're kind of like saying because this word was used and it's similar to like how you find in the Gospel of Matthew or something, then therefore it's a parallel. And I'm a bit sort of hesitant to go that far, but I do think there are some clear ones. But you're definitely right. There is a drastic shift between what we can say about the Torah based on what the Quran tells us about the Torah. It goes into long detail about, hey, remind the children of Israel about the time when Moses did this, and there's tons of those kind of stories that confirm the identity very quickly. With the Injil, you have to be a lot more nuanced, and I think it is achievable. I do believe you can show that it is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and other things. That's my perspective. I do accept it is weaker though in terms of establishing identity. Interestingly, a Muslim that I'm having a back and forward debate with, he argues that the Injil is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but he actually makes the argument from parallels in the Quran. Okay. So there's an argument to be made from, I think it's Surah 57, where it seems to be referring to the parallel of those that are like, they have the lamps and they're going to the wedding, but they don't take enough oil with the lamps and they go to get more oil. And there seems to be a parallel quite clearly. And I agree that does seem to be the case. But it is challenging.
So anyway, I don't want to like go into all that too much. And it's not to say that somebody can't do something else. I think once we start kind of rethinking or re-looking at the big picture, we got way more material that we can use when it comes to Old Testament in general, not just Torah, because Jonah's in the Quran too, as is Job and David and Solomon. So we've got more of the Tanakh than just the Torah. But there are, just roughly, I know my friend Alex did like a statistical analysis of number of verses in the Quran that are about New Testament or Old Testament characters and stuff. So not just like the name mentions, but how many verses are about story stuff. And it's like out of the 6,000 something verses in the Quran, there's I think there's about 150 that are about New Testament, and there's about 1,100 about Old Testament, right? Yeah. So it's just like it's barely comparison like between the two. And a lot of the New Testament stuff is more apocryphal than New Testament itself. So I think that also gives them a reason. And I know you know it because you talk to a lot of Muslims, right? They will sometimes appeal to those things, and they say like that's kind of evidence that there was other stuff, and we've lost the Injil, but we see remnants of it in these other apocryphal gospels, right? And that's evidence that there was something, it's been lost, right? And so anyway, I'm not saying that that's a valid argument at all, but I'm just from their point of view, keeping in mind the principle, what is persuasive to them. And trying to avoid, like all of Oz, as I'm sure you know, talking to Muslims, it's like you're walking through a minefield, and you're trying to avoid all these things that they can grab onto and distract you, right?
Yeah, just to add to that, so you're right. Like, for anyone who doesn't know in this live already, I'm writing a book on the Islamic dilemma. I'm trying to present what I think is my understanding of the best interpretation of how to make this. And one of the things that I'm being very careful of is the examples I give, particularly when I try to say the Injil seems to contradict the Quran, is that I use very basic examples that are not theologically heavy. So, right. For example, and the reason is for exactly what you say. If I say, the Trinity is in the Injil, the Quran does not believe in the Trinity, the first thing you're going to get is, well, hang on a second. Where does it say these words? Where does it say Trinity? Where, and you're going to get those kind of arguments, and it's like a complete distraction from the point you're actually making. So my way of dealing with this is to actually just bring up things that I think are pretty much not controversial. So, for example, the crucifixion, like the Injil talks about the crucifixion in all 4 accounts. Don't think that's really too controversial.
Well, it's controversial to Muslims, right? I mean, like it's
Oh,
a
yeah,
theological difference, right?
True. That's
So
yeah.
if we go back to the principle about motivations, and you know, it's important that we do unpack it more. But essentially, when we're looking at example, and we do need to go to examples for people to really understand what we're talking about, and to really appreciate what this is. But ultimately they're going to say, oh, it was corrupted, and you don't have the original, whatever. And we're going to say, of course, all right. So when we're looking at a parallel story, the Quran supposedly would have to reflect what was original before it was corrupted, right? So that means we know then, according to the Islamic claim, we know then what would have been original, okay? And then we have, let's say, the corrupted book. So let's say it's the Torah, okay? So we're talking about the Torah. So the Torah has some other change. It must have been changed from the Jews changed it from what the details that are given in the account in the Quran to what we have in the Torah. And then we're going to be saying, 1, when, okay, and 2, why, okay, and that why question is going to go to motivation, because you're going to either explain it as an unintentional change or an intentional change. And as you noted before, it's like it's not going to be unintentional, because that's very clear when you look at it in the specifics. And I think that's really something I need to emphasize to everybody watching. We need to be talking about specifics, not in generalities. So Muslims always want to talk about corruption in general. And then Christians want to defend the book in general. And we're saying, like, okay, I understand what the Christians are doing. And to a degree, I will do the same thing. I'm going to be trying to defend, the Quran, because the Quran clearly affirms it in general, but it also affirms specifics. So if, as we're going along and they're giving us like difficult time and we're trying to get them to see it, in the end, I don't actually need them to agree that it was reliable in general. I need them to see that the Quran affirms specific things. And those specific things are still going to dismantle the Quran. So instead of fighting every battle, we see, what do I actually need? I actually don't need that much to dismantle it. As long as we just do only, like our principle is, we're very focused, so we don't have distractions. So our focus is on only the stories that are parallel between Torah or Old Testament in general. And if they say, oh, not Old Testament in general, Torah, fine. Torah, okay? I don't need the rest of it, okay? So Torah, fine. So we'll do Torah to Quran. So any of the stories, and only the parts of the stories that the Quran includes that are parallel with the Torah, that's fine. That's all I need, right? And, they often say to me, well, but the details don't matter, right? That's how they try to defend it. And they'll say, I don't know if they said this to you, because I don't know how far you go into any of the details, but maybe they do with the Luke 1 thing, but they'll say, oh, that's what's amazing about the Quran, because the Quran only includes the most important information and the only things that are like useful, like relevant, because the Quran is about giving moral lessons when it gives the stories, right? Whereas the Bible is not about that. The Bible is just describing historical reality and God's plan as it unfolds in history. So it's not really about moral lessons in the stories. So when we're looking at the details and they say, well, see the Quran, that's what's amazing about the Quran. It doesn't have all this unnecessary extra information that the biblical accounts have, whether we're talking about the Torah or the New Testament, okay? And we say, oh, so the detail doesn't matter. Yeah, the detail doesn't matter, okay. So what you're saying, so I'll say, so what you're saying is the detail in the Quran doesn't matter. Right.
And we have a saying that really brings it home, and it's like a mental framework that you can keep running in your mind as you're evangelizing. We repeat, details, not doctrine. The details are where the money is, and the details are so irreconcilably different that it's something that you kind of have to focus on. And what I've seen is that in my evangelism, at least, focusing on the details forces you to open the scripture and look at the details. So it becomes a lot more of my thoughts versus your thoughts, but like, hey, it doesn't matter what I think, what I emotionally am invested in, what my beliefs are, what my denomination is. Let's go ahead and open the books and let's look at the details. And like you said, if it wasn't unintentionally corrupted, like a pen slip, I mean, these are completely different stories. And then it wasn't intentionally corrupted, it wasn't corrupted. There's no chance for that. And even when you go through the motives of prophecies of Muhammad or political, moral, ethical, what else, theological, and we always say to the Muslim people, add more. Like if there's something more that you want to have as a corruption claim in our discussion here, please add it. Like we're open to it. But then we have to have that fair evaluation throughout. And the details, I mean, a lot of them are stories. Like the end result still happens. So there's no real, need to corrupt that.
So I want to just say one more thing, and maybe we can dive into the stories. So I think what we were talking about before is the crucifixion. So the crucifixion obviously has huge theological relevance, right? So in that case, I'm going to say, well, it falls under doctrine. Yeah, of course, for you and me, we're going to say it's historical reality too. And they actually can say that too, because they'll just say, oh yeah, but it wasn't Jesus that was on the cross. Well, they'll take a different interpretation of it. But they'll still say, well, historically, the crucifixion happened, right? So the issue is the death and the meaning of the death, that it's sacrificial and substitutionary, and so forth. So that's the stuff they're going to take issue with. And so if we just say, well, the crucifixion, namely that it was a crucifixion as a sacrifice, the Son of Man came to give his life as a ransom, Mark 10:45, for example, right? So, but, when it's in the red letters, but they'll say, well, but why was that changed? They changed the doctrine. And then for us, we're going to say, well, but we don't have any evidence, right? And then they're going to say they don't care, right? Because from their point of view, they don't care. They are presupposing the Quran. So it's not to say that it isn't a valid point. It's the issue is that, like, what actually has the best chance at breaking through to help them to see it. And
I mean, it's all clicking to me now. Like you're talking about the parallel stories and how that just completely avoids these issues, these higher theological issues, because in effect, it's a common ground, right? It's just, look, we have a story. You supposedly have the same story. Let's evaluate these and then figure out which one is the actual correct one. And if there's a claim of corruption, let's go through that in detail. And I do have to admit that to me, as I'm thinking about it now, seems stronger. And I think there's a lot of weight to that. I mean, I gotta test this out. I gotta think about it. I gotta learn it, and I've got to prepare. But I'm very excited to do so. And
can I show you a couple verses before we get into the stories, like how we transition to the stories? Essentially,
I was thinking we get into it. I think the real tangible examples will help this really.
I think so. Yeah. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
Okay, just gonna share screen.
And PG, are we going into pillar 1 right now? Just right away of.
Yeah, I first want to just give a quick summary of the kind of the main points we go through. We have, like I mentioned before, we have 5 real pillars of Islam, which represent not what they will call their pillars, of course, but just kind of using that language. And so this is just kind of like a big snapshot of it. What we do first in our process is we deconstruct the Quran. And then secondly, after we deconstruct it, we reconstruct 5 biblical pillars. So the pillars represent, for the Islamic pillars, the 5 real pillars, so to speak, are essentially like core fundamental claims that Muslims make and their sources make. Okay, and then we're going to deconstruct them. So the first one is that the Bible's corrupted, or in our case, because we're going to limit our focus to the Torah, of course, they're going to claim the Torah is corrupted. So we're going to dismantle that by using verses from the Quran, especially. Of course, we can use some hadith and stuff to show that their sources, especially the Quran, affirms the reliability of the text of the Torah in the time of Muhammad in the 7th century. And in particular, we're going to emphasize 3 things that are confirmed or claimed to be confirmed in the Quran within the Torah, which is prophecies of Muhammad being in the Torah, the law code being reliable in the Torah, not authoritative for Muslims, but authoritative for Jews and reliable in that time, in the time of Muhammad. And then 3, the stories of the prophets. Okay, so that's pillar 1. Pillar 2 is now we get into story comparisons. So the next 4 pillars are about specific narratives we're going to be comparing. And the pillar 2, we could use a lot of different things, but we often use a sample from the story of Joseph when we're just kind of going through it, but we can expand on it as much as we want depending on our time. And so the claim is the author of the Quran and the author of the Torah is the same author, namely God, right? So, but mainly the idea is it's the same author behind it. So is it the same mind that's behind it when it's telling the story? It's supposed to be telling the same story, but it's telling it completely differently, right? So number 3, so obviously the answer is no. Number 3, the Islamic claim is that Abraham traveled to Mecca with Ishmael and together they built the Kaaba. This is actually the most important pillar. So in a way, so actually it's not only that we're going to be comparing stories, but which stories are we going to be comparing? And pillar 3 and 4, which actually use the same narrative from, there are elements of it in the Quran, but the essence of it is in Sahih Bukhari 3364, where it tells the story of Hagar and Ishmael separating from Abraham. And it's a lengthy hadith, and we like to say, if you're going to learn one hadith, this is the one you need to know, okay, to talk to Muslims. So Abraham traveled to Mecca with Ishmael, and together they built the Kaaba. So we compare that with Genesis 21, as well as some other verses for context, which shows this is not the case. So if Abraham and Ishmael didn't build the Kaaba, they didn't travel to Mecca, they didn't build the Kaaba in Mecca. And if they didn't build the Kaaba and they didn't go to Mecca, then Islam's not an Abrahamic religion. And the Kaaba wasn't built by Abraham, therefore it was built by pagans. Number 4, which is related using the same story, is about the ancestry of Muhammad going back to Ishmael. So the claim is that Ishmael is the ancestor of the Arabs, particularly the Arabs in Mecca, not the father of all Arabs, because Islam doesn't even claim that. And that Muhammad was a descendant of Ishmael. So not only an indirect descendant, but that Ishmael moved to Mecca since he was an infant, was raised in an Arab tribe, the tribe of Jurhum, married into the Jurhamite tribe, had an Arab wife from that tribe, and through that, God brought the messenger who brought the Quran. Okay, and that's mentioned in Surah 2, 127 to 129, when Abraham and Ishmael have built the Kaaba, and then they pray that God will send from their descendants, from Mecca, a messenger, meaning Muhammad. So if Ishmael never went there, he didn't marry a wife from an Arab tribe there, and the Kaaba and Muhammad isn't a descendant of Ishmael in the way that Islam requires. And in fact, the reality is he didn't marry an Arab, he married an Egyptian woman, according to Genesis 21:21. And he lived nowhere near Mecca. He lived in essentially what is now modern-day Jordan. Number 5, Muhammad followed in the pattern of previous prophets and received his initial revelation in a manner similar to Moses. Where this comes from, and I think you would have heard it in our lectures, Chris, but we didn't talk on the phone yesterday about it, which was about the story of Muhammad going to the cave of Hira and then eventually being brought to Warqa, and Warqa telling him, and the statement, what he tells him essentially that helps him to come to the realization that he's a prophet, is that the angel that appeared to Muhammad in the cave of Hira is the same angel that appeared to Moses.
Yeah.
And it's really striking because people don't talk about that. And Alex seeing that connection is like huge thing, and that helps us then. What's the story we're going to compare? Well, what is the story? What story do we read in the Torah about an angel appearing to Moses?
The story of the burning bush.
That's right, and it's the only one. So Muslims sometimes say, well, no angel appeared to Moses in the burning bush, and they say that because they're thinking of the Quranic account, because there's no angel in the bush in the Quran. But I then say, well, did Waterka have the Quran? Right? Obviously not. So the only verses were like 5 ayat that were revealed in the cave of Hira by that point, and they're not about Moses. So he didn't know the Quranic version of Moses. So what account could he have known? Well, maybe the Torah. Okay, so we're going to look at the Torah to compare it and then we're going to see, are these so similar to the point that Waterka could conclude that it was the same angel? And no, they're not. So by that, those are the 5 core pillars for deconstruction. Now, if we find that they still are resistant, we don't go on to the next phase. We stay to the first phase of deconstruction and we just add on more stories that we compare. Okay, because there's no point in reconstructing until they acknowledge the problem. Okay, so reconstructing, then we go through 5 pillars, we call 5 biblical pillars. And 4 of these are Old Testament, and the last is finally the gospel. Okay, so from New Testament. So the pillars for reconstruction is original sin, because the Quran denies original sin. Blood atonement, because the Quran also denies blood atonement. Theophanies, also, meaning God coming in human form, especially in the Old Testament. And the suffering servant of Isaiah 53, that the Messiah would come and die as a substitutionary payment for the sin of his people. And then finally, we can conclude it with a regular gospel presentation, and I would normally use the Romans Road combined with the Way of the Master. Okay. So beyond that, then we can disciple them. We can answer their general questions. If they have other questions about the Bible, if they don't believe the Bible, but they're like, okay, well, I see the problem with the Islam, that it's false, but why should I believe the Bible? Okay, well, we can go through, answer general things, but that is then not from an Islamic point of view. If they're bringing up an Islamic objection, we go back to deconstruction.
This seems, really, really good. So am I right in saying something like, let me bring us up for this. So am I right in saying we could summarize this as we're showing that there is no continuity between the author of the Quran and the author of the Torah? They are 2 different authors. There is no continuity. And because I would say it's a central claim of the Quran is that it has continuity. Muhammad is meant to be a prophet, in the line of prophets from Abraham. And therefore, that isn't true. And necessarily, it seems to follow that therefore Muhammad isn't a prophet. And so the Quran must be false. And therefore, Islam is false.
That's right.
Is that like a fair summary?
Yeah, absolutely. And also with some of the specifics, especially pillars 3 to 5, we're talking about specifically Abraham and Ishmael didn't build the Kaaba. Specifically, Muhammad isn't an Ishmaelite. And specifically, Muhammad doesn't follow in the pattern of previous prophets. Right? So those are at the foundations of what makes Islam Islam. Like, if you think about it, the distinctiveness of Islam is really the Hajj. Right? It's the pilgrimage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? It's all centered on the Kaaba. The Kaaba is the focus of Salat. So, and Salat is really, I actually like to, when Muslims explain it like this, typically they'll say, it's prayer, but it's actually not prayer, it's worship. So, it's a prescribed way of worshiping that supposedly God established. And if God established it that way, of course we should do it. But he didn't establish it that way. That's the problem. Okay. So that's kind of the big picture. Okay. So let me show you what I was going to show you, which is in pillar 1. So the claim is, the Islamic claim we're going to dismantle is that the Torah is corrupted. Okay. So these are the questions that, I have to undo that. So these are the questions I would start with, like to formally start our methodology. I would hold up, this is actually both Hebrew Old Testament and Greek Old Testament. Okay, but so I'd hold up Hebrew Old Testament and I would open it and I would say, so here's a Hebrew Old Testament, a Torah. Do you believe the Hebrew Torah has been changed? And they're going to say, Chris?
Well, yeah, they're going to say, yeah. They believe it's been changed, yeah.
But actually, you know what? Surprisingly, some say no.
Yeah, okay. I've met people that say no as well. They're interesting. Well, actually, there's a resurgence. I won't go off on a tangent, I promise,
Yes.
but there is a resurgence of Muslims who want to reconcile rather than say it's lost or corrupted. They actually just accept it as it is, and then they give very wild interpretations to reconcile things, which is
That's going
interesting.
to be fun to do with them with what we do. So
Yes, that's another reason why I kind of like what you're doing, because that also hits at that as well.
yeah, it's going to hit them all.
Yeah.
But so and honestly, the way they answer this question, it doesn't matter. So, because you know what? Once we show all the differences, they're going to say what? The Torah is corrupted.
Yeah.
Because that's all they're going to have left.
You have to
They're going to change their mind if they don't agree, if they agree at the beginning. So, number two. So then we just say, okay, so do you believe it was changed? Yes, they say yes. Then you say, when do you believe it was changed? Before Muhammad or after Muhammad?
That's when they start to think, I usually find. That's when they think, hang on a second, I got to get this answer right. If I say it's after Muhammad, then that is problematic, because that means that the Quran's account was contemporary with the actual, Islamic Torah that wasn't corrupted, but it's different. So it seems like I've got to say it's before Muhammad, but then exactly how before, and then they start to you can see the clocks turning.
Yep.
And they're thinking about it.
Absolutely. And then and honestly, it doesn't matter what they say. They can say, I don't know. They can say it's before. They can say it's after. Say, okay. And then I'll say, can I show you some verses from the Quran about the Torah? And they're going to say yes. And then we're going to go into verses. So now we've got our focus. We're talking about what the Quran says about the Torah. So the rest of the first pillar is showing we only need to see, what does the Quran say? We're not going to evaluate what it says. We're going to do proper exegesis. Okay. We can steel man it. So we don't need to have a problem with the things it says. We're not going to be defensive. It's very important for Christians to understand this, especially for the first example we use. Okay, so Prophecies of Muhammad. So actually, all of these, I don't know if you've looked at the handout yet, Chris. So this is the handout, which has 11 categories of ways that we can establish that the Quran is affirming the Torah in the time of Muhammad. Okay, so
I've not seen this yet. This looks very good.
Okay, so
it's good.
This is stuff I developed. This is
really good.
One of the things I developed a lot with, on top of what Alex had. I wanted to have a really airtight way of going through what the Quran says about the Torah. So the first verse I would go to is Surah 7, 157, and I'm gonna actually switch to that. Okay. So the first verse I'm going to show them is this verse. Is this big enough?
Yeah. It's a good size.
Okay, so just this verse, and actually only the first sentence is all we need. Okay, so this is the Clear Quran, and it's nice, actually. It has a little heading too. Clear Quran, I always suggest to people to read the Clear Quran if they're going to read the Quran, because it has nice headings throughout. It helps you understand it. Okay, so verse 157, it says, they are the ones who follow the messenger, the unlettered prophet, whose description they find in their Torah and the gospel. And it goes on to basically give a description. He commands, etc. So I say for the first verse, and I'm going to say, let's ignore the gospel because we're talking about the Torah. And I'll ask you, Chris, because I don't know if we talked about this before, so we can do a little more interactive. I'd say, okay, so who is the messenger, the unuttered prophet there?
Well, I mean, it's meant to be Muhammad.
Okay, good. Now you're going to notice the questions I ask are not meant to be complicated.
That's all right. I always have to think twice. Is that am I missing something here?
I was doing the same thing. I was like, well, I think it's Muhammad.
I wanted.
They're not gotcha questions.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, they're not gotcha questions. They're just basic exegesis. What is it saying? What does it mean? And that's all we're doing. We're also not trying to overstate things, which I think is what Christians do a lot when they're doing Islamic dilemma arguments. When they're using verses, they often overstate it. So I'm trying to be very careful. So, and it says the messenger, the unuttered prophet. Okay, it's Muhammad. Yeah, of course. And then now I'm going to ask when it says they are the ones who follow him, who would that be referring to?
They one's fashion, they probably choose the fit. So I'm guessing it's Muslims who were Jews and Christians who have found the messenger
Yeah, and what tells you that it was that's who they are?
Because of the context of the Torah and the Gospel. So
That's
we know
right.
the Torah
So
is
who would have the Torah?
the children of
Jews.
Israel, the
Yeah.
Jews.
So and in what time is this referring to?
This is contemporary with the time of Muhammad because it mentions Muhammad. So we would say this is the 7th century.
Yeah, so exactly. So it's very good that you're explaining how you got it. Like, is this referring to Muhammad? It doesn't just refer to Muhammad, it calls them followers of him. Okay, so if they're followers of Muhammad, I like to say that's not just a generic Muslim, like a submitter to God, because they're going to say everybody who before Muhammad who believed in Allah was a Muslim, they're a submitter to God. But that's not what this says. It says a follower of the messenger, the unlettered prophet. So they can't be following him until he's there. Okay, so and it says they found his description in the Torah. Okay,
so this was the 7th century Jews or Christians who had their description.
Yeah, in particular the Jews, because we're talking about the Torah. So they have the Torah. They find him described in the Torah in that time in the 7th century. So that means are the prophecies in the Torah according to the Quran. Okay, we're not arguing about prophecies. According to the Quran, were the prophecies reliable or unreliable in the text in the 7th century?
They were reliable.
Okay, there you go. So we're getting an impression already. We're not going to overstate it, that it's the whole Torah. But we're getting the idea that it's not giving us the sense that it was corrupted. It's giving us a sense that they found his description there. So that means Muhammad is fulfilling what was there. Right? Okay, so this is establishing a point, and you know what? No Muslim is going to disagree with this. Even the da'is are not going to disagree with this. This is also why I like to start with this verse, because we're going to start with an agreement instead of a disagreement and an argument. Okay, so, and I'm not going to argue about the prophecies of Muhammad. We're going to deal with that later, because if you think about that, how am I going to answer Deuteronomy 18, Isaiah 42, Song of Solomon 5 and stuff? How am I going to answer it? I'm not even going to talk about it. You know what I'm going to talk about? Muhammad wasn't an Ishmaelite. Because you know what? I'll say Deuteronomy 18:18. Oh yeah, okay, the brothers of Israel. Okay, I'll give it to you. Let's say it can include the Ishmaelites. But Muhammad wasn't an Ishmaelite.
You go for the head.
It still doesn't qualify. Okay? So I don't even need to talk about brothers. What is brothers in the context? Okay? I can establish the fact that Muhammad wasn't an Ishmaelite because Abraham and Ishmael never traveled there according to the Torah. So the Torah can't include Muhammad by talking about Ishmaelites if the Torah has Ishmael living in Jordan. Right? And he married an Egyptian woman. It didn't have any Arab children. So it doesn't qualify. Okay, but the point is, we're not going to talk about that at this stage. We're just going to establish what it says. The Quran affirms that there's prophecies of Muhammad in the Torah in that time. And, lest they think that I'm talking about the present day Torah and they get defensive, they say, not about today's Torah. Like, who knows? Maybe it's been corrupted since the 7th century. Okay? But back then, way back then, like it's was affirming what was there. And you know what? This also establishes a principle. Whatever the Quran says, it affirmed in that time was reliable in the text. Okay? So, I want to show you this one because it's just fun.
So I could be wrong here, but something I just noticed about that was in the Arabic, I believe the word written is there, whom they find written in their Torah and their Gospel. I don't think that translation had the word written, but sometimes Muslims
I think it used described for it.
Yeah.
Described used as description. Maybe that's what it is.
Let me check it out.
Whose description did they find?
Okay, so if I go to Quran.com and I highlight over the actual Arabic, the transliteration says written for one of the words.
There you go.
So I'm not sure if it's...
It's probably yeah, okay. It's fine. It's written. Of course it's written. Okay, so let me show you an example. Do you know an example in the Quran of specifically what it said was prophesied in the text about Muhammad? You know what it says?
Going from memory now. I know there's hadith that do actually
No,
give...
Quran, not other sources, just the Quran. Okay.
Okay, wait. So you have 61:6, which says his name is Ahmed. I mean, it says he's unlettered.
But Ahmed is related to the Injil.
Okay, well, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. So
my knowledge that isn't any like explicit.
No, here, yeah, I know, but people
is?
don't talk about it. But look at this, Surah 48, verse 29, the last verse. Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and those with him are firm with the disbelievers and compassionate with one another. You see them bowing and prostrating in prayer, seeking Allah's bounty and pleasure. The sign of brightness can be seen on their faces from the trace of prostrating in prayer. This is their description in the Torah.
Wait, but this is there meaning
Muhammad and the companions.
Oh, it's both.
Because it's Muhammad and those with him, that's the companions.
And those with him are firm with his. Oh yeah, and those. So that's a good point. Yeah, I always took it just in reference to the companions, but that's a good point. Yeah, it is also
it's
a description
crazy,
of Muhammad.
Right? So we should see. Forget Mahmedim. We need Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. We need it to say that he had companions who were firm with disbelievers. We need it to say that they bowed in prostration and they have the mark on their forehead. Okay, that needs to be in the Torah. Okay, that's crazy.
Interesting.
So they're not going to get around it like it's a generic thing. That's fine, and we're not going to emphasize it too much. I'll just show this verse to say, oh, here's another example. It says Muhammad here's the description of the Torah. So that would have been in the Torah in the 7th century, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we would use a lot of other verses, but what I want to jump to, actually, I need to show you this because do you remember the Unbreakable Chain argument?
Yeah, with the. Well, sorry, when you said that, my mind immediately went to the Isnad Hadith science.
Yeah, that's why I call it that. Okay, so let me just, I should mention it because it's a very significant point. It's an argument I developed. So usually I'll start with Surah 5, and I'll start with verse 43. Okay, so this verse is used quite a bit. Why did they come to you for judgment when they already have the Torah containing Allah's judgment? Then they turn away after all. They are not true believers. Now, what is the context of this? Well, I could even determine it just from the verse. Who are they? Well, they have the Torah.
Right. So children of Israel, the Jews.
Okay. And they come to you, meaning Muhammad, for judgment. Of course, I'm sure you know the context of this. This is the cases of zina in Medina that are brought to Muhammad. And the more popular hadith that's used in Sunnah Abu Dawud with the pillow, Muslims have answered to that, and sometimes they reject the hadith. So I would usually use Sahih Muslim 1700 because it actually gives it as this explicit context for the verses in this section from verses 41 to 47. It says that that's the occasion when they were revealed, whereas the pillow one doesn't say that. There are other hadith in Bukhari that also talk about cases of zina. So it's that general context, but the point is here. So let's say we go through that argument, and I'm just going to be quick with you about it because I don't want to spend too much time on it, and I know you're already aware of it. So what are they going to say to this when I say, okay, so does this, according to the Quran, verse 43, is the Torah reliable or unreliable in the time of Muhammad?
They will say something like, it's reliable, but it's only reliable for commandments. So for the Mosaic law.
Yeah, actually, that's a good response. That's what I want them to be able to at least say. That's all I need them to say. Usually they will say it's reliable. Most Muslims I'll talk to. But the more difficult, or like the ones that are more trained and stuff to resist it, and they know about these things, they'll say, no, it doesn't say that. Actually, they have a better argument. I don't know if you've heard it. So they'll say, no, this was actually it's not saying that the Torah was reliable at all. It's just saying that Muhammad used the Torah for argument's sake.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that. I put that in the same category of this verse is being sarcastic, and things like, because I have heard those kind of responses as well.
Do you remember how I would respond to it? Okay, so look at what it says in the verse. I say actually that's a clever answer. Okay, but how do I refute that answer? It says it contains Allah's judgment. Okay? So that means it is actually reliable in the text, at least with respect to what you said, the law code. Right?
Yeah.
So we established one thing already. Prophecies of Muhammad were in the text in the time. Secondly, law code was reliable. Okay, so even if they're not going to say the whole thing, that's fine. Okay, all right. Would you say the law code was reliable? Yes. Verse 44, this is the unbreakable chain. Okay, and everybody focuses on the wrong thing, in my experience, on this verse. It says, indeed, we revealed the Torah containing guidance and light, by which the prophets who submitted themselves to Allah made judgments for Jews. So too did the rabbis and scholars judge according to Allah's book, with which they were entrusted and of which they were made keepers. So do not fear the people, fear me, nor trade my revelations for a fleeting gain. And those who don't judge by what Allah has revealed are truly the disbelievers. So what I want to draw attention to is, one, we're talking about the Torah here. To who was the Torah revealed to? Of course, it doesn't say, but we all are going to agree it's going to be the Moses. And then it says, it's very interesting, that it says, by which the prophets who submitted themselves to Allah made judgments for the Jews. So then I started thinking about it, because essentially a big part of our methodology is we're going to be looking at Dead Sea Scrolls. So when were the Dead Sea Scrolls? Well, they range from about 250 BC to 70 AD. So most of them, including the manuscripts of the Torah, predated Jesus. Okay. So when we're talking about this is going to get us there. So even if they're going to contest about, well, maybe it's not reliable till Muhammad, is it reliable to Jesus? Okay. And this will help us. So it says, we revealed the Torah, and the prophets used the Torah for judgment among the Jews. So now the question is, when were the prophets? Okay. Now for you and I, we recognize, according to the Bible, up to Malachi is about 400 BC. So we can say kind of simplistically, from Moses in the 1400s BC to Malachi about 400 BC, from 1400 to 400 BC, they had the Torah and the prophets were using it. Okay. But actually, it's very interesting. Do you know you probably have heard it in a lecture, but I want to definitely share it for people to hear. I want to share a clip of what Yasser Qadi has said about it to explain the Islamic position.
My favorite Islamic scholar, Dr. Yasser Qadi.
Okay, gotta accept the share.
There we go.
Let me know that it's working.
Good to go.
Yep.
The roots of Islam are in Judaism and Christianity, meaning the line of prophets. Yes, the roots of the theology of Islam, they go back all the way to Jerusalem. There is a continuity, and our Prophet ﷺ is coming at the end of a long line of many, many biblical prophets. There has been no prophet since Jesus until our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And Jesus is at the end of many dozens of prophets that came from the time of Moses up until Jesus, non-stop, continuously. There had been a whole series of prophets that the Old Testament talks about and the New Testament references. And then our Prophet ﷺ comes and he is proclaiming the message of those prophets. And he is saying, I am following their footsteps. But even as he's following...
That's good enough. Okay. So
good validation.
Now, what I want you to see is he said that from Jesus to Muhammad, there's a gap.
Yeah.
Okay? There's no prophet from Jesus to Muhammad. But from Moses to Jesus, there is no gap. So there was always the children of Israel, like the way I would say it is, I'll talk to Muslims and I'll say, like, my understanding of Islamic teaching is that one of the great favors given to Bani Israel is that they always had a prophet or messenger from Moses to Jesus. That's one of the blessings that God gave them. And that's also why they're more responsible for ultimately rejecting Muhammad, because those prophets and the books, especially the Torah, talked about Muhammad. That's the claim of the Quran, right? So, and I would agree in principle, if that were the case, then they should be held more responsible when they reject him, right? Just like we were going to say, well, the Jews in the time of Jesus were more responsible. They had the scriptures, and if they rejected the Messiah, and even today they have the scriptures. If they're believing rabbinical Jews, they should accept Jesus. That's not like somebody else who doesn't have the scriptures. So the point is that there was never any gap. There was never a time when they didn't have a prophet. Okay, so let's go back to what it says in Surah 5:44. Okay, sharing again. Okay, so it says that the prophets used the Torah by which the prophets made judgments for Jews. Now, I'll ask you, Chris, according to Islam, are prophets able to sin?
No.
Right. So we're doing an internal critique. What does the Quran mean, and how do Muslims understand the meaning of the Quran? So would it be possible for Islamic prophets from Moses to Jesus to have tampered with the text of the Torah?
No, it wouldn't have been, no.
Exactly. So that means we have a perfect isnad of the text of the Torah from Musa to Isa. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm thinking of like how Muslims would push back on this.
Okay, right, the rebuttals.
Let me show you a couple of verses, supporting verses. So not just Yasser Qadi, because they can throw him under the bus. Okay. And Surah 2, verse 87. Indeed, we gave Moses the book and sent him after him successive messengers. Okay, and then we gave Jesus. Surah 5, verse 19, which is actually the verse that Yasser Qadi was commenting on when he talked about the gap between Jesus and Muhammad. He takes it from this verse. O people of the book, our messenger has indeed come to you, making things clear to you after an interval between the messengers. So Muhammad comes after an interval between the messengers, which he understands to mean that means before there was no interval. Okay. So the interval is between Jesus and Muhammad, not before. There are also hadith that make it explicit, that talk about after one prophet, a prophet would rule, and then after that prophet, another would succeed.
So this 5:19, it says that there was only a gap between Jesus and Muhammad. This is the main verse that confirms that.
Well, it's one of them, okay? But actually the better ones, I'll give you two other ones that are good. 61, sorry, I'm forgetting one of them. 19, that's what it is.
Chris, I see the gears
both in verse 12. So
yeah. 19. So I got some thoughts. Yeah, you show me this
before you give your thought. Let me give you two more verses. Okay, Surah 19, verse 12. It says, "O John, hold firmly to the scriptures."
Yeah,
that's John the Baptist. Okay, so which scripture did John the Baptist have?
That's a very good point. Well, I mean, he had the Torah.
Exactly.
Yeah, only Old Testament.
And 66:12. There is also another example of Mary, the daughter of Imran, who guarded her chastity. So we pray, blah blah blah. She testified to the words of her Lord and his scriptures.
And is that in which chapter is that? Sorry, 66?
66:12.
Yeah.
66:12.
The one way to remember is they're both verse 12. 19:12, 66:12. Okay, and also, let's go back to our primary passage in Surah 5. And we were reading verse 44. Verse 45 is still talking about the Torah. It's talking about the law code in the Torah. And then verse 46, then we sent in the footsteps of the prophets, Jesus.
Nice.
Okay, and he's confirming the Torah.
And you got 350 as well, where Jesus, he confirms the Torah, but also abrogates parts of it or changes parts of it.
Yeah. So abrogation would be about law code.
Yeah.
right? So it's not going to be like he's not coming in and changing the stories.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And he's not changing the prophecies of Muhammad according to the Quran, right?
I always, perhaps I over focus on theology. So when I think of abrogation, I think that's great for them to explain changes in like the legal code, like what's permissible, what's prohibited. And I think, but it doesn't help them with theology, because if God is a certain way in the Torah, he must also be that exact same way in the Quran. Otherwise, you have two different gods. But you're right that actually there's another aspect to it, which is that you can't abrogate stories. That would be silly. You tell a story of Abraham doing something, and then the Quran comes and says, actually, he's now doing something else.
Yeah,
which would be quite weird.
It would have to be different authors at that point.
Absolutely, right. That is quite profound. Before you continue, there are some super chats I just want to bring up real quick, because some people have been waiting for a little while, so I thought I would bring them out. So Edward W says, the Master Key, TM, trademarked. Very nice. Is becoming mainstream. God bless. Thank you very much, Edward, for your support there. We have Cheryl to the G. Christ will come again. Thanks for the hard work for the church. Thank you, Cheryl. Much appreciated. And Ramkumar Haridat, I believe that's pronounced. All the previous prophets are mentioned by name in the Torah and Gospel. Muhammad is the only lost prophet not found in the Bible. Yes, we do not find Muhammad in a scripture, and hence the Quran is false. But yes, thank you very much for your support. And I'll let you. I was going to mention my thoughts. My thoughts about what you're talking about, because I've thought about this as well. Because these have, in my study, have called out to me. It seems as if the Quran is very clear that you have a prophet. The prophet gives the scripture, but that isn't like a one-time thing. It's repeated through many prophets until you get to Jesus, and then there's a gap, and then you have Muhammad. The only way I could imagine Muslims would sort of deal with this is they would basically just rely on the other parts of the Quran that say, but these prophets were killed. These prophets were neglected. They weren't listened to. And hence, although these prophets, I think it's reasonable to think they would have came with the same, maybe not necessarily the same scripture, but the same message. Although we do know that successive prophets did also come with the Torah, for example. I think it's clear that they would have had the same message. But yeah, it's a difficult stretch from the Muslim paradigm. I think the Quran wants us to believe that Torah has been authoritative. Torah Old Testament has been authoritative up until the time of Jesus, at least. I mean, really, I think it goes all the way to Muhammad. But
yes, of course, I agree. I'm just pointing out, even if they're not going to agree about Muhammad, it's actually tighter of an argument to get it to Jesus. And I also I don't even need to get it to Muhammad, is the point.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's what essentially we're trying to emphasize to Christians, like, pick your battles. Like, if you don't actually need to get it to Muhammad and you can still get it to Jesus, then why are you so hard on emphasizing that point? And it's like, okay, we can try, and if they're resistant and they don't see the point, like a lot of Muslims see the point. I'm going through. I remember this one girl in Detroit I was talking to. She knew quite a bit. She was resisting all these arguments another guy was trying to use, using typical Islamic dilemma arguments trying to focus it on the Torah, using other verses like that we don't use, and I don't use because I know how they respond to them. And so then when I stepped in and I was talking to her about it, and I was relaying carefully with the stuff that I do, she was fully tracking. And we got to the Unbreakable Chain. And I was going to I usually go through all the way to verse 48, because it will also undercut them trying to bring it up later, right, as an objection, to help it put it in context. Because we actually, I like to say, we actually read the Quran in context. Whereas a lot of
crazy
the Muslims,
concept,
they just take a verse out of context, right? So, I got up to, I think, verse 40. We were doing 44. And then I said, so you can see that the Torah is actually even just 43, I think, and maybe 44. She said, oh yeah, like the Torah was reliable. I said, yeah, up until the time of Jesus. She said, yeah, and Muhammad. Right. So she just gave it to me. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to proceed, right, and go on to the next stuff. Whereas other people, if they're going to resist and they're going to say only some of it, and then I say, okay, well, going to get, what about the law code? So they'll say yes. They're like, okay, I'll take what I get, and whatever I get is enough, right? If they give me more, that's great. But if they only give me some, that's fine. Okay. So what you were saying, there's a parallel actually in a couple places actually, but in one of the places in 2 Kings, when you were talking about Muslims might say that the people, they killed the prophets and stuff, right? So it says in 2 Kings 17, yet the Lord warned Israel and Judah by every prophet and every seer, saying, turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments and my statutes in accordance with all the law that I have commanded your fathers and that I sent to you by my servants, the prophets. Yet they didn't listen, they were stubborn, etc. So, and actually, I think it's Nehemiah 9 that mentions uses the same language the Quran, I think, must, through the Jews influencing Muhammad, probably got it from, which is like throwing the book behind their back. It's actually
Yes.
used in Nehemiah. So, so I think what is the point here? Well, did they change the Torah? No, they rejected the Torah. They disobeyed the Torah, which is the same thing in like Surah 244. Like I usually use this. I was just skipping it with us today. But 40 to 41 is usually people use 41, right? And I use that as well. But I'll usually read 40 to 44. And 44 says, do you preach righteousness and fail to practice it yourselves? Although you read the scriptures, don't you understand? Like the issue isn't the scripture. The issue is the disobedience. So I'd like to say, like, Chris, have you ever disobeyed the Bible?
Fortunately.
Okay, so when you disobeyed the Bible, did the Bible change?
No.
Okay, so the issue is not in the Bible, it's in you or me, right?
Makes
when we
sense.
disobey it. The very reality that we're disobeying it implies that what are we disobeying? We're disobeying what it says. What it says is reliable.
That makes sense.
Okay.
So I guess, it just thought in my mind, it's always present. It's always been around, right? Because the prophets keep giving it. Whenever a prophet is sent, this is like an unbroken chain because regardless of whether they adhere to it or not, it's still always there.
Yeah. Let me, okay, I got to give 2 more verses, then we're going to talk about stories. I think we're going to go over your 2 hours. That's okay?
Yeah, that's all right. Like I said, I draw the line at 3, but yeah.
All right.
One in Rome.
And if you ever want me back, I'm always happy to come back. So we can have lots we can share. So 1094. This is, of course, a verse that everybody uses in Islamic dilemma stuff.
It's everywhere.
But I'm going to tell you, I think, I'm going to tell you how I would explain it. And I'm going to explain it in a way that, as a correction. And I don't mean about you, but in general, the way I hear it being used. So I'll read the verse. If you, O prophet, are in doubt about these stories that we have revealed to you, then ask those who read the scripture before you. Okay, so that's the essence of what matters in the verse. So then I would say to the Muslim, well, actually, many Christians misuse this verse. They'll say that this is about Muhammad doubting. It's not about Muhammad doubting. The reason we know that actually is same context, 104. It says, say, O prophet, O humanity, if you're in doubt. So who is doubting? Well, it doesn't say prophet in the text because, of course, that's inserted. It's inserted because it's second person singular, right? So, and that's the traditional understanding. It's referring to Muhammad in verse 94. But the issue is, according to Islamic teaching, they're never going to accept that because that contradicts Islamic theology. So you'd have to convince them that the Quran is contradicting itself in its theology, which I don't need it to. Make it perfectly consistent in the Quran. I don't care. In the Quran, what it says. The problem is what it says compared to the Torah, right? So this, I don't need to strawman it. I don't need to misrepresent it. I'm going to actually say the Muslims are right on this. It's not about Muhammad doubting because the Islamic claim is that it's wahi that's given through Gabriel to Muhammad, and Muhammad is not the author. That's the claim, right? So it's not like he is going to just be the vessel who transmits the dictation. So although Allah can be addressing Muhammad, it's not really about Muhammad's doubt. It's going to be relayed through him to the audience. So then really the issue, the way that I would understand it and the way Muslims understand it, is the people who are hearing the recitation of it from Muhammad. So if they're in doubt about these stories we revealed to you, then ask those who read the scripture before. And then I would go to the context, because I say, okay, so we're reading the clear Quran, which inserts in the brackets these stories. There are a couple other translations that do that. But let me tell you why I think Mustafa Khattab, the translator, is correct. The context. If we just go back a bunch in the Quran to the beginning of the stories in the same surah, and we just look at the headings, which is why I like using the clear Quran physically, because you have the headings. Digitally, you won't have it, but I have it in the PDF. Okay, you can see Noah and his people. Messengers after Noah, Moses and Aaron. Here you can see it in the text, Moses. Again, Moses. And Pharaoh drowns. Then 93, we settled the children of Israel in a blessed land. Up till our verse. So from verse 71 to 93, we read about the story of Noah and Moses and Pharaoh. So then I'd ask, where would you read about that in the previous scriptures?
In the Torah.
Exactly. So, and it's also, what is the verse saying? If you're in doubt, well, doubt about what? The stories that were just being talked about. So if you're in doubt about the story that is being told to you in the Quranic account, go ask the people who've been reading the scripture before. Well, who are you going to ask? The Jews who have the Torah that have the stories of Noah and Moses in them, which means, of course, they're going to corroborate it. Except they're not going to corroborate it.
Yeah, that's where it all collapses.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree that the weight of this is not in the first part, so to speak. I mean, the doubting is, like you kind of say, it's somewhat irrelevant. If I understand you right, and you're thinking how I am, which is that it's the fact that the context is, these stories that are found in the Torah, the Quran is meant to be in line with this.
Yeah.
And so the scripture, the stories that we found in the Torah, act as a verifier or a validator of what the Quran is saying here and has been saying since verse 71 or whatever that verse was.
Yeah.
And that to me is the important bit. Now, when you present this, they'll say, "Don't you know the verse starts off with the word if?" I believe if you check out the verse,
Sure.
They usually say "if you are in doubt" or whatever, and they'll say because the word "if" is there, this entire verse is a hypothetical. Because it's a hypothetical, you can basically just ignore it. It doesn't have any significance. It has no real value.
Let me make the point that, one, we're not talking about Muhammad's doubt, so it's the hypothetical doesn't apply to him; it applies to the people.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're in doubt, they can go consult the Arabs who are hearing the story being recited in the Quran. They can go consult the Jews. Okay, so that's a real hypothetical. It's not a real hypothetical if you're going to argue about Muhammad, because the Muslims aren't going to accept it.
Yeah,
but once we shift it from Muhammad to the people, they'll accept it.
Yeah, in my mind, I just think whether it's hypothetical is kind of beyond the point.
Yeah, sure.
If I say, if this, then do this, even if that if is never going to happen,
sure.
The fact I've told you what would occur or should or ought to occur tells you the validity of that very thing.
Yeah, 100%.
Which is that you should go ask the people of the book. You should go about these stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree that's the main bit. That's the important
exactly.
bit.
So my point essentially is it doesn't matter who would be in doubt. Okay, whether it's Muhammad or the people, I don't care. Whoever they give me, I'll accept that. Then it means it can be checked. Okay, so not today though. It's not if sometimes Christians make the mistake when they're using verses like this and they say, so if we're in doubt, no. We're not in the 7th century. So the Quran is talking about 7th century. We haven't established today yet. Okay. So 12:111, the last one I'll share before the stories, and is usually what I'll use to transition because it's more explicit. It says, in their stories, there is truly a lesson for people of reason. This message cannot be a fabrication. Rather, it's a confirmation of previous revelation, a detailed explanation of all things, a guide and mercy for people of faith. So the context of this, when it says in their stories, is in verse 110, it says the messengers. Okay, so the stories of the messengers and prophets, there is a lesson for people of reason. This message, which refers to the Quran can't be a fabrication. Why? Because it's a confirmation, a previous revelation, a detailed explanation of all things about the stories of the prophets. So the stories of the prophets in the Quran confirm the previous revelation, even in the details.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's interesting. I'll just show this quote from the study Quran. It's talking about Surah 11, verse 49, which is one of the verses where it says that before this, you, Muhammad, didn't know about the stories. Okay. Which also implies that the stories were reliable, because how did he, if you could say, well, the accusation that people would make, well, he learned it from somebody else, or he read it, right? Well, the whole point is he's illiterate, so he couldn't have known it, which means that the stories were reliable in the time.
Yeah, they form the basis of like the miraculousness. Like, the fact that he knew these stories without being literate is in itself a miracle, I guess Muslims would argue.
Yes.
But that would be very weird to make that argument based on corrupted things that are man-made, right?
Because you would be saying he couldn't have known it by reading it. Well, if it wasn't there in the writing, then he couldn't have read it anyway, even if he could read. So the whole thing is it has to be reliable in the time for them to make that claim.
That makes sense.
So in the clear Quran, or not the clear, the study Quran, on Surah 11, verse 49, it says that it was just in the context talking about the story of Noah. And it says that this is understood to mean that the prophet did not know such accounts as the story of Noah before the revelation came to him, nor were they known to the people of Mecca at that time, since they were not people of the book. And given the presence of Christians and Jews in Mecca during the lifetime of the prophet, it is more likely that this verse refers to a lack of knowledge about the details. Now, there's one word I really like: details. Okay? About the details and spiritual meaning of such stories, rather than a lack of general knowledge. Okay? He didn't just know a general idea of Noah or Noah and a flood. He told a detailed account of it. Right. So he couldn't have known that story before. So the claim of the Quran is that's why it's a miracle, not that he knew it in general, not that it mentions Noah. Sometimes Muslims try to say, oh yeah, well the Quran mentions Joseph, and then Genesis has Joseph, so that's a confirmation. No, it's telling completely different stories. Okay, so that's really the miracle, is not he's heard a name. the miracle would be, hypothetically, he was able to tell a very detailed account of something that he didn't have access to.
That's a really good point.
Okay, so we got to talk about the stories now. Okay, so,
and if we can go over some of the key conclusions too of the main things that we just talked about, and I have it pulled up here on the document too, Craig.
Yeah, sure. What page? These ones?
Exactly. Yeah, because now we have overwhelming evidence that the Quran confirms these things, and you can go through these too.
Yeah, okay. So the Quran claims to confirm or fulfill the Torah in the time of Muhammad in the 7th century. Specifically, the Quran claims to confirm 1, prophecies of Muhammad, 2, the law code, and 3, the stories of the prophets. So even if somebody doesn't agree with a general thing, like I saw that live stream you guys, the whole bunch of you did recently with Jai and DOC and IP and God Logic. And I remember there was a point where you guys were going back and forth trying to defining general. And I was like going crazy because I was thinking, you guys should just get to the stories and talk about the specifics. Forget the generalities. And who cares if it's confirmed generally or not? It's about a confirmed specific thing. So those are 3 specific things that we can identify in categories even. And then we're going to do the very specific things of what it says in the stories. The Quran affirms its consistency with the Torah and teaches that the Torah would corroborate it with 1, having prophecies of Muhammad, and having a reliable law code authoritative for the Jews, and the stories of the prophets would be consistent, including in their details. And of course, the Quran affirms the textual reliability of the Torah and its authority for the Jews up until that time. Okay, so that's essentially the conclusion of that pillar. And with that, then we bring in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, and we're not going to talk about that today. I want to get into the stories.
Sure.
So
before you do,
Yeah.
really, really quickly, a friend of mine has just put a super chat in. I know Defending a Lion, and me and him worked together on our Quran study for the Islamic Dilemma. He asked, have you considered the differences to be plagiarism from the Talmud? For example, there are several passages about faces glowing, having marks on the forehead of righteous Jews in the Talmud.
it's like so much. Okay,
That's such a
So-
such a funny question.
I thought that would be the
I was
answer.
wondering-
It's like hard to give an answer to that. There's so much. So what we've also been discovering by studying the stories is that there is so much more Midrash, Jewish legends in the Quran than what people seem to be recognizing. Okay, so even like Gabriel Reynolds in his Quran that identifies sources, he doesn't identify them all. So once we start looking at the details, we started thinking, I wonder what it says in the Midrash. And over again, the differences in the accounts have a basis in the Midrash. Okay? Even though they're supposed to be talking about the same account, like in the Torah, the differences in those details are rooted in the Midrash. But also, the Quran doesn't just include Midrash, it messes up the Midrash. Okay? So it doesn't just have a distorted account of the Torah, it has a distorted account of the Midrash. Okay? I want to show you, so I don't want to just do the example we did yesterday, I think, because classically we'll use the example of the bloody shirt, which I shared with you, Chris, on the phone. So I want to give you something new to to learn. And there's so much more to learn, so might as well do a different example. Did you want to say anything before I go, though?
Not me, no. I'm
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to do a really, we'll do a fun one. Okay. So it's a bit longer, but we're going to do a little bit after that example. So in the Quran, we usually use the example of verses. So in Surah 12, in the story of Joseph, for Pillar 2, we usually do verses 16 to 18, which is about the brothers bringing the bloody shirt to their father and how the father reacts. And it's a complete opposite thing. In the Torah, in Genesis, he reacts by crying and concluding that Joseph is definitely dead. He's been eaten by an animal and nobody can comfort Jacob in his mourning. But in the Quran, he believes that Joseph's alive and the brothers were lying. Okay, so complete opposite. But I want to show you something new. So we're going to go to the Potiphar's wife story. Okay, do you know this story well, Chris?
Do not think so.
In the Quran? Okay, so it's going to be great. Okay, so in Genesis is going to be Genesis 39, where we always start when we're talking to Muslims, we start with the Quranic version. Okay, and we want to establish what it says and accurately can understand it and make sure we've made observations so they're kind of grasping what's there. And sometimes they know the story and you can go to the Torah, but that's if you're pressed for time and you know you're talking to someone knowledgeable. But usually I like to go to it anyway to make sure that, there's nothing we missed and that they're seeing it for themselves and they're refreshing on it. Also, Muslims are, to some degree, when they think of the stories, they remember it based on memory from what they've been told. So it's important we go to the text because the text isn't the tafsir. We're just looking at the text.
The details.
Okay. So verse
Yeah.
23, we're going to read from verse 23 to 29 first. Okay. So this is equivalent to the story of Potiphar's wife trying to seduce Joseph. And in the tradition, her name is Zuleika. And she's not named here, but that's the tradition. And also, Potiphar is not Potiphar in the story. He's called Al-Aziz, or chief minister. Okay, so just make sure we know what we're talking about. Verse 23, and the lady in whose house he lived tried to seduce him. She locked the doors firmly and said, "Come to me." He replied, Allah is my refuge. It is not right to betray my master, who is taking good care of me. Indeed, the wrongdoers never succeed. She advanced toward him, and he would have done likewise, had he not seen a sign from his Lord. This is how we kept evil and indecency away from him. This is, God saying, we protected him. For he was truly one of our chosen servants. They raced for the door, and she tore his shirt from the back, only to find her husband at the door. She cried, "What is the penalty for someone who tried to violate your wife, except imprisonment or a painful punishment?" Joseph responded, "It was she who tried to seduce me." And a witness from her own family testified, if his shirt is torn from the front, then she has told the truth and he is a liar. But if it is torn from the back, then she has lied and he is truthful. So when her husband saw that Joseph's shirt was torn from the back, he said to her, "This must be an example of the cunning of you women. Indeed, your cunning is so shrewd. Oh, Joseph, forget about this. And you, O wife, seek forgiveness for your sin. It has certainly been your fault." Does that sound different, Chris?
Yeah. Let's go through the accounts and let's compare.
Yeah, okay. You want to make sure. Yeah, let's identify it. So she tried to seduce him. She locked the doors. It's an important detail because he's not going to get out of the room.
Right.
Okay? She locked the doors. She invites him to come over to him. So she doesn't grab him first. She invites him first. And then he prays for help. Okay, and he's tempted. It says he would have done it had he not been given a sign from God. And then they're racing. Both of them are running together. And she grabs his shirt from the back and it tears. So the shirt doesn't come off. It's torn. And they find her husband at the door. So Joseph never exits the room here. They get to the door and essentially Potiphar's on the other side of the door. And so then it leads to she's trying to defend herself. He did it. Look what he tried to seduce me, whatever. Okay, you should punish him. And then Joseph defends himself. Says she did it. And then there's a witness from the family who is present. And he says, okay, you should examine the shirt to see who's guilty. If it's from the front, then she's in the right and he's in the wrong. If it's from the back, he's in the wrong and no, he's in the right and she's in the wrong. And then they examine it and they see the tear is from the back, so therefore he is innocent, not guilty, and she is guilty. And then he says basically like let's leave this, like forget about it.
So I know in the biblical account she does try to seduce him, but I'm trying to remember the details well enough to sort of like compare with this and see exactly where this is changing.
Okay, yeah. So there is another. We're gonna come back. Maybe we'll come back to the Quran. Also, I want to read more, but it's just so we can take. It's not too much to take in. But 30-32 is a whole other scene with a banquet and the women who cut their hands, and then after the banquet, he goes to prison. Okay, so he's going to get to prison, but it's not going to be right away. It's not at that point. So before we look at the banquet, let's look at Genesis 39. And let's make it bigger. So we'll go down to, so basically at the beginning of the chapter, we see basically he's sold to Potiphar. God blesses him in the household. He's elevated. Everything is being blessed and productive. He's put in charge of everything except, the only thing he's not in charge of is the wife, right? And he left everything in Joseph's charge. Now he was handsome. And verse 7, after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house. and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And as she spoke to him day after day, so it's not one time, day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her or to be with her. Then we're going to get to the real scene. One day, so I want you to see the backdrop of it is she has tried to seduce him many times. The first time she tried to seduce him, he said, how can I do this? Look at how your husband has taken care of me, and trust me, I would dishonor him and sin against God if I did this. So he gives a verbal explanation, like a reasoning why he won't do it. And then day after day, she tries to seduce him and he wouldn't listen to her. So now he's not engaging verbally. It's just after the first time he explains it, after that, he doesn't engage. Because he knows, like, yeah, it's like if you start talking about it, maybe you're going to give in. Okay. Verse 11, and this is the real parallel, but the backdrop is also not compatible with the Quran. But it says, but one day when he went into the house to do his work, none of the men of the house was there in the house. She caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household and said to them, see, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house.
Huh. Already see some key changes here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then she laid up his garment by her until his master came home. And she told him the same story, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came in to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out of the house. As soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, this is why your servant, the way your servant treated me, his anger was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison. I'll leave it there.
So one thing I noticed, okay, so the shirt is different, the garment, and what happens to that, the whole ripping narrative is different. The fact that in the Quranic account she locks the door so he can't get out, but in the biblical account he actually does get out. And he actually goes to a group of people, and then she seems to follow and then makes an accusation.
He doesn't go to a group of people. She calls the people to come.
Oh, okay.
Her servants, right?
Nice.
And she tells them the story, like her claim, and then she waits for her husband to return after that, and she repeats that claim.
Right. But yeah, fundamentally, there's substantial, maybe is the better word, like changes. It's not exactly the same story. There are differences here. And so now we have two different accounts, but they're clearly meant to be reporting the same events. Yeah, if this was like an eyewitness thing.
Let me ask you questions as I go through it then. So as you think about what the Quran said. Okay, so one day when he went into the house to do his work, none of the men of the house was there. Were there any men in the house in the Quran?
I think not.
There was.
Oh, there was. Okay.
It says in verse 26, a witness from her own family testified. If you look it up in the Arabic, it's masculine. Okay. So there's a male witness from the family who was present. I mean, nobody's present in Genesis. That's the point. She waited until all the males, especially, were gone.
Right.
Was there any member of the family present, according to Genesis, to witness it?
No.
Okay, but according to the Quran, there's a witness.
Right, yeah.
Okay, which is interesting. She caught his garment, saying, lie with me. In the Quran, she doesn't catch his garment and then say, lie with me. She says it, and then afterwards she catches the garment. And she catches it while they're running.
You've done a big in-depth thing in this.
Yeah.
It's very, very specific.
Yeah.
Yes. So it says, come, verse 23. She locked the doors and said, come to me. He replied, he gives us a reason. She advanced towards him. Notice it says. So she wasn't right next to him when she said, come to me. Obviously, you wouldn't say come to me if you're standing right next to each other. He's, in the room. She says, come to me. Like, she's in the bed or whatever she was. So she's not right next to him. But according to the Torah, she caught him by his garment saying, lie with me. So that means she's right next to him and she's grabbing the garment and then she says it. So there's different order, different proximity. Okay. A different thing that she says. She doesn't say lie with me. She says, come to me. Okay. What did Joseph say in response in the Torah? What did he say?
Well, he denied it still.
Look.
Oh, wait, no, he doesn't. Sorry, he actually just leaves. Right.
He just leaves.
Yeah,
because
just
we
goes
already
and he leaves the
established the
garment.
pattern in verse 10, day after day.
This is a repeated thing.
Listen. He doesn't say anything after the first time.
Right.
So the last time he doesn't say anything. He just runs. And he gets out of the door, right?
Yeah.
That one's huge. It changes everything because if that one detail, I want you to also begin to see this. You change a detail, it changes other things because things are interdependent.
So it's like a compound effect.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
If you get him to go out of the door and he leaves, there can be no interrogation. Okay. There can't be them both running together because he just bolts. Okay. She actually doesn't run in Genesis. She's left holding the garment and it comes off of him. Okay. Of course it doesn't tear, but it comes off of him and she left with the garment and then she leaves it by her side until she calls the male servants to come, which also implies they weren't present. But in the Quran, does she call the male servants?
No.
No, because there's a witness that's already there, and he didn't leave the room.
Right.
The reason she needs other people to support her in the Torah because she's alone now. So now it's going to be their word against each other, and who knows what's going to happen. So if she can get supporters, she calls them first. She gives her version of the story,
right?
And so they hear that version, and they could potentially corroborate it. And then she tells her husband the same thing.
And this just seems to be much more realistic, I guess, for lack of a better word. Like you would expect her to not want anyone there while she tries it, and then immediately to call them in to give her account of the story while Joseph has fled, as opposed to there's just someone there, which and also I noticed that the Quran seems to sometimes condense things. It just it gives the story, but then either it gives the impression it's just technically this happened a lot, but we're just not going to mention that. We're just going to put it all into one.
Okay, but here's the problem. Actually.
Right.
Condensing, that's what they often say.
And I'm not actually saying that as a defense. I understand why they may think it's a defense, but I wouldn't think of it that way either. Yeah.
You know what I started? I did a chart. Because I've been doing charts comparing all the stories in details, but I haven't finished them all. I'm maybe halfway through the stories, but I also created a summary chart I went through and identified all the verses that are on each prophet. And in a chart, I looked at basically among those verses in the stories that are told in the Quran, how much of the story that's told should be parallel with the Quran, with the Torah, but isn't. So for example, Noah in the Quran, most of the Quranic account of Noah is him preaching to his people and the chiefs of his people, and they reject him. And then God sends the flood. Now in Genesis, he doesn't preach. Okay, so there's no preaching, there's no opportunity for them to board the ark, and God sends the flood. So how many of those verses are about him preaching, which has no parallel in the Torah? It doesn't exist in the Torah, but it should fit in the Torah because it's talking about the same person and same general time frame, right? So what's interesting is when I started analyzing the verses, I'm not sure if I can bring this up. Let me see if I can bring it up. Might take a second to load the file because it's really big, but I created a chart of, all right, so this would be it. So I'm not sure if you can, how well you can see it.
Sorry. Can you Control Plus and zoom in, maybe?
Yeah.
That's okay, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so let's use Noah. So number 4. There are 113 verses in the Quran about Noah. 82 of those verses have no parallel in the stories in the Torah.
Huh.
So that means 72.57%, 73% of the story of Noah in the Quran is extra.
Or the Torah omitted it in some way.
But the point is, what do the Muslims say? The Quran selects and abbreviates and is more concise. I'm saying it's not. 73% of the story of Noah is extra.
Yeah.
Okay? Or 60%, like 3 out of 5 verses in the Cain and Abel story are extra. So that's 60%. But it is also parallel because it's in that story. It's in the same story, but the story's told differently, and it adds stuff that is not compatible with the Torah. 60% of that story, or almost 47% of the Adam story, and so forth. 90% of King David and Solomon. Okay, so this is not about being more concise. Let me go back. So let's go back to the story. So it's not just like selecting things. There's all these extra things, and you're going to see this in the rest of the account, actually. So anyway, the point is he has no defense and so forth. So let's go back to the Quran here. It's very interesting. Obviously, it ends up completely differently, right? He's defending himself before Potiphar in the Quran. And he's shown to be innocent. And Potiphar basically says, yeah, like you're innocent. And she's guilty. And he doesn't throw him in prison. It's like, this is not minor differences or a difference of interpretation. This is a different story. That's the point. Okay. And guess what? It goes on. And like I said, the extra. Some women of the city gossiped. The chief minister's wife is trying to seduce her slave boy. Love for him has plagued her heart. Indeed, we see that she is clearly mistaken. When she heard about their gossip, she invited them and set a banquet for them. She gave each one a knife and said to Joseph, "Come out before them." When they saw him, they were stunned by his beauty, so stunned that they cut their hands and exclaimed, "Good God, this cannot be a human. This must be a noble angel." She said, this is the one for whose love you criticized me. I did try to seduce him, but he firmly refused. And if he does not do what I order him to do, he will certainly be imprisoned and fully disgraced. Joseph prayed, "My Lord, I would rather be in jail than do what they invite me to. And if you do not turn their cunning away from me, I might yield to them and fall into ignorance." So his Lord responded to him, turning their cunning away from him. Surely he is all-knowing, all whatever. And so it occurred to those in charge. This is like weird. So it occurred to those in charge, despite seeing all proofs of his innocence, that he should be in prison for a while.
Huh.
So he does go to prison. Very different circumstance. What is with this? Have you heard this story before, Chris?
Roughly from someone who has picked up on this as well. Someone called Rob, a friend of mine from Sentinel Apologetics. He talks about the cunning of the hands and how the Quran butchers it in his words. I kind of wish he was here now to talk about it, Yeah.
This is just one of many examples, but this is I'm not sure who it was that did the super chat. He asked about the Talmud.
Depending on line.
That's it. Yeah, depending on line.
Yeah. So this isn't the Talmud, but it is Midrash. Okay. So this is a Jewish legend, and so you can see it in like a good place you can get like a nice modern compilation is Legends of the Jews, where it lays out all these stories, and then you can look up the primary sources. So actually, let me just find it for you here. So Legends of the Jews.
So while you're doing that,
Yeah.
just to kind of like summarize what we're seeing so far and why I think this is so powerful and relevant to everyone who has an interest in the Islamic dilemma, is these are parallel accounts from the Quran telling supposedly the same story that we find in the Torah, and yet they differ substantially, but there's no valid reason a Muslim can give in response to explain why the supposedly the same author is choosing to change the details in the accounts. It seems more likely that this isn't a case of corruption, it's a case of two different authors, and hence the Quran is not from God. And I'm also thinking you could make a case that actually the stories in the Torah are just kind of better. Or like, you know, sometimes there's more detail in the Torah.
I would just say let's stay away from subjectivity.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sometimes we're gonna find things that are kind of like don't make sense.
Well, I'm thinking like, so you know how in Luke 1, Zacharias, what's it, son John, he's given his name, but in the gospel account it records that no one in his family had the name John before, or Yohanan before.
Yeah.
And in the Quran it says the same thing, but it doesn't have the no one in his family. It just says no one has been given the name Yahya before.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me just shows that the Quranic retelling of the story, I know this is the Injil rather than the Torah, but that it's just giving a lesser detailed account when it's supposed to really be a detailed confirmation, a detailed retelling of stories from the prophets. But yeah.
Okay, let me show you this in so this is in Legends of the Jews. So let me make it one bigger maybe. So
That's
there's
good.
a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot in the legends. Okay, but this is so basically she's tried to seduce him, she failed. And that says when Zuleika could not fail. This is not like the final seduction scene. This is like, you know, in the Torah she tries many times, right? So she's tried and she's failed. When Zuleika, so that's Potiphar's wife, could not prevail upon him to persuade him, her desire threw her into a grievous sickness. And all the women of Egypt came to visit her. And they said to her, "Why are you so languid and wasted, you that lack nothing? Is not your husband a prince great and esteemed in the sight of the king? Is it possible that you can want anything of what your heart does, that you could lack anything that your heart would desire?" Zuleika answered them, saying, "This day shall it be made known to you from where comes the state wherein you see me." So she's going to say, well, this is why I'm sick. She commanded her maidservants to prepare food for all the women, and she spread a banquet before them in her house. She placed knives upon the table to peel oranges, and then ordered Joseph to appear arrayed in costly garments and wait upon her guests. When Joseph came in, the women could not take their eyes off him, and they all cut their hands with the knives, and the oranges in their hands were covered with blood. But they, not knowing what they were doing, continued to look upon the beauty of Joseph without turning their eyes away from him. Then Zuleika said to them, "What have you done? Behold, I set oranges before you to eat, and you have cut your hands." All the women looked at their hands, and lo, they were full of blood, and it flowed down and stained their garments. They said to Zuleika, "This slave is in your house did enchant us, and we could not turn our eyes away from him on account of his beauty." She then said, "This happened to you that looked upon him but a moment, and you could not refrain yourselves. How then can I control myself in whose house he abides continually, who see him go in and out day after day? How then should I not How then should I not waste away or keep from languishing on account of him? And the woman said, it is true. Who can look upon his beauty, etc. Why do you not disclose to him that which is in your heart, rather than suffer your life to perish through this thing? Zuleika answered them, daily do I endeavor to persuade him, but he will not consent to my wishes. I promise him everything, etc., etc. Her sickness increased upon her. Her husband and her household suspected not the cause of her decline, etc. What it's going to do later on, then she's going to seduce him.
Right.
Or try, right? So, well, that's really interesting. So what is the occasion in the Midrash for why she set the banquet?
We'll have to look up again. To me, what caught my eye and what I heard that really got my attention was the reason as to why they're cutting their hands.
It's good. We can harmonize it with the Quran. The Quran doesn't say what they were holding other than the knives. Okay. Well, the Midrash has the information. They're holding oranges. Okay. But what my question is, what is the reason for her holding the banquet?
Could not prevail upon her to persuade him her desire through agreeable sins, another way we came to them.
It's because she. Go ahead.
Her desire through into a grievous sickness.
She's lovesick.
Right.
Okay. It's not that she tried to seduce him and the thing got out and the women are gossiping about what the terrible thing she did. That's the Quran. Here, they're supporting her. She's lovesick for him, and they see she's bedridden. Why are you so languid and wasted that you lack nothing? Is not your husband a prince, great and a sea? Like they're saying, what's wrong with you? Like what happened? Right?
Yeah.
So then she commanded her maidservants to prepare food for all. She had a banquet, and then they see him, and then she's like, "See, now they get it." This is like, so they tell her, you should tell him and you should seduce him. Right?
Right.
But the Quran, what's the reason? She already tried to seduce him and she was the one found in the wrong. It's been your fault. Some of the women of the city gossiped. The chief minister's wife is trying to seduce her slave boy. She is clearly mistaken. And then she says later on, see, this is the one for whose love you criticized me. So they were gossiping about how bad this was. And so then she holds the banquet to show them. So one, this is the wrong order of events. Okay, if the Quran is confirming the Midrash, okay, which it shouldn't be doing, but if it's confirming them, it doesn't confirm the Midrash either. So it's in the wrong order. It's the wrong occasion. It's the wrong reason. Okay, so it's not even being faithful to that. And then at the end of it, it's interesting. He gets thrown in prison, right? Let me just find a summary of it. It's harder to find in the actual text. Okay. Here it is. The torn garment. Also in Midrash. She laid aside her rich robes of state, put on her ordinary clothes, and took to her sickbed, in which she had been lying when the people left to go to the festival. Also, she took Joseph's torn garment and laid it out next to her. So the tearing in the garment is also in the Midrash. You remember?
Okay, right.
Okay, you remember how there was also a witness from the family?
Yeah, in the Quranic account.
You guess it's in the Midrash?
Oh.
Okay. So it says, the matter was, now it's interesting. The matter was brought into court in, let's remind ourselves of the Quran. So while they're still in the room, Their interrogation is going on. Joseph's defending himself. The witness says, examine the shirt, front or back, whether it's torn. And if it's torn from the back, then he is innocent.
Right.
Okay, it's torn from the back. And he's shown to be innocent. The banquet happens. And then later on it says, so it occurred to those in charge, it's kind of weird, despite seeing all the proofs of his innocence, that he should be in prison for a while. So it is kind of brought to a court afterward, and he's put in prison wrongfully.
Right.
Now, this is interesting. So the Midrash says, the matter was brought into court where priests sat as judges. Joseph protested his innocence and related all that had happened according to the truth. But Potiphar repeated the account of his wife had given him. The judges ordered the garment of Joseph be brought, which Zuleika had in her possession, and they examined the tear therein. It turned out to be on the front part of the mantle.
Huh. So they've switched.
It switched.
Yeah.
And they came to the conclusion that Zuleika had tried to hold him fast and had been foiled in her attempt by Joseph, against whom she was now lodging a trumped-up charge. They decided that Joseph had not incurred the death penalty, but they condemned him to incarceration because of the cause of stain upon Zuleika's fair name. Potiphar himself was convinced of Joseph's innocence. When he cast him into prison, he said to him, I know that you are not guilty of so vile a crime, but I must put you in there, lest the taint cling to my children.
Huh.
What's amazing is that you see the Midrash actually is like, it actually is not compatible with the Torah.
Right.
Right? Potiphar convinced of Joseph's innocence.
Hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
that doesn't work.
So the rabbis are heretics. They change the scripture, but in the Midrash. You know, it's very interesting. I tell Muslims, I agree with Muhammad and the Quran. The rabbis distorted the Torah in the Midrash. They don't distort the text. They don't change the text. They distort the stories in their retelling of it and expansion upon it in the Midrash.
So you've just brought something to my mind here. You know, they go to Surah Baqarah, ayah 79, like to talk about corruption and how what are those who write the book with their own hands. The next verse says something like, and they say, never will we be cast in the fire except for a number of days.
Yeah.
And I think you can find this in the Midrash and the Talmud, like that concept that when you go into Gehenna, you will only be there for a period of time.
Yep.
And that to me makes me think that 79 and 80 are actually meant to be read one after the other. And 80 is an explanation for what they were adding in the book, which is mentioned in 79.
Okay, but I do think, while that may be the case, I would say it definitely also is that the Jews told Muhammad and the companions that Muhammad was in the Torah. Okay, so when it's verse 76 is key. So 75 is the start of the passage. Do you believers, so Muslims, expect them, which is the Jews, to be true to you, though a group of them would hear the word of Allah, then knowingly corrupt it after understanding it? When they meet the believers, so when the Jews meet the Muslims, the followers of Muhammad, they say, we believe. But in private, they say to each other, will you disclose to the believers the knowledge Allah has revealed to you, so that they may use it against you before your Lord? Don't you understand? So the Jews are going to the companions of Muhammad and they're saying, yeah, we're with you. We agree with Muhammad. He's teaching what all our prophets have taught. Which I think is also the type of occasion when they told him the stories. So I don't think it was a private meeting. I think there were occasions where maybe there were private meetings, but it wasn't that he was lying. I don't think Muhammad was lying. I think Muhammad didn't need to lie. I think we don't have to accuse him of it. So we can say Muhammad was told by the Jews, we're on your side, we support you. And there's a reason for this. I think the Jews did it because they needed an ally against the Christians. And they told him basically, yeah, you're teaching, you're a monotheist, you are against idols, your everything you're teaching is the same thing that all our prophets have taught. You know, it's kind of like what Dawa guys say. All the prophets have taught the same message, right? Well, what's interesting is that's true in the Midrash. In the Midrash, all the prophets, even going back to, guess what? I don't know if you know this, Adam was a prophet in the Midrash.
Okay, right.
Okay. All the guys that we don't consider prophets are prophets to the rabbis and the Muslims. And they say that basically they all taught the same message. They all mentioned afterlife. This is in the Midrash too. So I think the rabbis said to him, look, we're on your side. We support you because they want an ally. But they don't want to convert. That's the key thing. They want to stay Jews. Jews want to stay Jews. So some of them went overboard and they told him, you're even written in the Torah. And they went back privately to talk with one another, and the leaders rebuked them for it. Why would you tell him that? They're going to use it against us. Meaning they're going to try to force us to become Muslims. And in the footnote, which is based on tafsir and early tafsir too, it says, so the Quran says, verses prophesying the coming of the prophet in the Torah. You know, forget the references, but that's the idea. It's prophecies of Muhammad. That's what they were hiding. So the claim of the Quran is that the Jews told Muhammad and the companions Muhammad is in the Torah, and they're not showing it. And some of them come back and they say, no, you're not. Okay. So I think that's actually the primary thing. You could have verse 80 is about that too. I mean, there's any of the things in the stories they would have heard. But that's the real issue. And actually it's interesting because in Islamic sources, the Islamic sources specify actually what was changed in the early Islamic sources and later ones outside of the Quran. And the primary thing explicitly that they say was changed is that they removed the name of Muhammad and they changed his description.
Yeah, with the tafsir, I'm careful with tafsir, particularly about these, because I tend to find that most of it's eisegesis. It's reading into.
No, but what I'm saying is that actually fits with what it's saying.
Yeah.
Okay. And especially, we could talk about it more another time about the context, but basically they were surrounded by the Christians in the north and the Byzantine Empire and the Christians in the south in Yemen, the Abyssinian Empire or kingdom, and the Jews were losing ground. So they needed an ally. So I think they supported Muhammad and his movement, and they fed him stories to say, you're just like our prophets, and we're behind you, we're with you. And they even told him stories, and they made the stories of the prophets sound like Muhammad because they do.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much to say, Chris.
Yeah.
I want to show you the witness. I was going to say the witness, though. Where was it? That was the prepared the banquet. Where's the witness? I thought I had it in here.
Just going to show this super chat by Inspiring Philosophy. Who said, Khan! by Captain Cook. Yeah, very, very good reference there.
Shout out Minecraft Philosophy, the world's newest streamer as of last
night. I know. I noticed as well.
So funny. Love Michael, man.
So I'm just trying to find where it says it. I think it's maybe used the word that. Yeah, there it is. Okay, got it. I just need to get it bigger for you. Okay, remember what it said in the Quran about the witness. It says that, sorry, where is it here?
There it is.
Witness, verse 26, and a witness from her own family testified. Okay, it doesn't say anything about the witness, right? I wonder what that witness is. Do you know what the witness is?
I'm guessing Midrash gives a more expanded account.
It does.
Great guess.
Potiphar gave credence to her words, and he had Joseph flogged unmercifully. Okay. While the cruel blows fell upon him, he cried to God, "O Lord, you know that I am innocent of these things, and why should I die today on account of the false accusation by the hands of these uncircumcised and pious men?" God opened the mouth of Zuleika's child, a babe of but 11 months, and he spoke to the men that were beating Joseph, saying, "What is your quarrel with this man? Why do you inflict such evil upon him? Lies my mother does speak, and deceit is what her mouth utters. This is the true tale of which did happen." And the child proceeded to tell all that had passed.
So that was the witness.
The baby.
A child, an 11-month-old.
The speaking
Wow.
baby.
Sounds familiar.
It sounds familiar.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's not the only other occasion in the Midrash of speaking babies. I started noting it every instance. Abraham was a baby when he spoke. And like he speaks like as a mature 10-day-old. He speaks in the Midrash. Moses, David, Noah. Like there's a whole bunch of them. It's like no wonder the Christian legends have it. They got it from the Jews, the idea. Speaking babies. Okay. So
Interesting.
yeah. This one's a really, so the one I was talking about, the Midrash, let me show you this one. Okay. I hope you didn't read it. Okay. I want to ask you. So let's go to same chapter 12. I'm going to ask you if you can figure it out. You know, the Quran is so clear, right? Verse 67. This is Jacob. So basically the occasion of this in the story of Joseph is the brothers have returned back from the famine after the first trip down to Egypt. And Jacob is going to give them advice for their return to Egypt for the second time. So it says in verse 67, Jacob then instructed them, "O my sons, don't enter the city altogether through one gate, but through separate gates. I cannot help you against what is destined by Allah in the least. It is only Allah who decides. In him I put my trust, and in him let the faithful put their trust." We'll do the next verse too. Then when they entered as their father had instructed them, this did not help them against the will of Allah whatsoever. It was just a desire in Jacob's heart, which he satisfied. He was truly blessed with great knowledge because of what we had taught him, but most people have no knowledge. What I'm going to ask you, Chris, is verse 67. He tells them not to go through one gate, but through separate gates.
Right.
What is the reason he told them that?
Oh, just because there's something destined, right? He never explains what it is.
No, well, he doesn't know what's going to happen, but why does he tell them not to go through the same gate?
I don't know. I don't. Is it written here? Am I missing it?
Chris, can you put our faces on the bottom of the screen too with it?
Yeah. Let me.
Yeah.
We're back.
We can interact. Okay.
Magically
Yeah.
appeared.
So you can't figure it out, right?
Right.
Now I'm going to ask you, make one up. Be a Muslim
Congestion.
who defends the passage and make up a good reason.
I don't know. There's like one gate there. I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't go through the same gate. I don't know. Literally, the only thing I think of is that it's so narrow that you need to split it out and go one in each gate.
Maybe it's a big gate, but like maybe think about it. Like why not stay together go through the same gate, go through separate gates?
Because you want something to happen to one I don't know, someone in particular to go through one gate and someone goes through a different gate to split them up for some reason.
Yeah, why split them up?
I'm not sure.
Maybe, I don't know, let me give you some, maybe security or something, like maybe you're not on one spot together. Okay.
So if something bad happens, you're not all going to die.
Like trying to think whatever reason. Okay. So that's whatever reason it is. It's not apparent though, right?
Right.
Okay. So let's go to.
Thank you, Nate. He says, thank you all three of you for this live stream. Lots of great insight and information. Thank you very much, Nate.
Nate, we're just getting started. We actually haven't even gotten to pillars 3, 4, or 5.
Yeah, I'm thinking pillar 3, right? You say that.
I'm just doing extra stuff with you. I'll have to do stuff another time, maybe.
Yeah.
All right. So here it is. So it says, as he, meaning Jacob, knew that they were likely to attract attention on account of their heroic stature and handsome appearance, he cautioned them against going to the city altogether through the same gate, or indeed showing themselves altogether anywhere in public, that the evil eye be not cast upon them.
Ruh-roh.
That's yeah.
You didn't guess that one.
No, I did not. No.
So it's very interesting, right? Like there's no reason given in the Quran, but it is in the Midrash. It's like the Quran is coming from the Midrash, right?
Yeah.
It's very interesting because if you read, let's do.
So one possible objection might be something like, but obviously Muhammad is giving these stories to an audience, and this audience is familiar enough with the stories that they seem to be at least convinced of it in some sense, right? Because some Christians, pagans, Jews did become Muslim, at least according to the Islamic paradigm, right?
But not many Jews.
Not many Jews. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think like 5 Jews or like 5 notable Jews are given in like sources. They probably differ with that, but so what I would say is it would make sense to me if what Muhammad is saying, like the actual like a specific account, was actually a variant of these stories that was around at his time, and hence when he says these things to people who have heard that variant, it makes sense. So they're actually somewhat like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I have heard this before. Whereas others who are perhaps aware that this is actually just like an oral variant of the story, it's not actually the full account, there are some details that are missing, they wouldn't be convinced. But yeah, it's just about
except the problem is always in the details. So when you examine it closely, is that possible? Well, think of the cutting hands narrative. So what we noticed was the reason for the occasion for the banquet was totally different.
Yeah.
And the occasion for it in the Quran was gossiping, right? Because he was found innocent and she was found guilty.
Yeah.
But that's the opposite of what Genesis says. And the Midrash is based on Genesis. Like it's expanding on Genesis. So you can't have a version of the Midrash that's expanding on something that doesn't exist. Okay? All the Midrash we have is actually corroboration of the Torah. Ironically. Because the Midrash at times contradicts the Torah, but at the same time, what is it expanding upon? It's expanding upon what we have. Because according to the Midrash, he is found guilty. Right? So he can't be found innocent and then expand upon that with the banquet because they were gossiping. Think of all the things that they would have to change. So having a different version of the story, it's still got to be a version of the story that fits with what the Midrash is corroborating for us, which is that it's corroborating the account we have in the Torah that it's based around.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so it ultimately, we got to go to the details with them, and that's the thing, is we're all about the details. So we have to, like, once they start trying to give an explanation, we have to examine it. Okay, and let's say they can give an explanation for one thing. That's fine. We got others, right? So look at this. Tafsir al-Jalalain on Surah 12, verse 67. Jacob said, "O my sons, do not enter through the same gate, but separate gates, lest the evil eye smite you."
Right. So they were aware of the story in Midrash, and they were using it as exegesis for the verse.
Yeah.
Bang.
Okay. But also, here's another problem. In the Midrash for the gates, okay, it's very important. When we're comparing it with the Quran, again, the details. So actually, let's show the Quran again. The context of the Quran is that the brothers have returned from Egypt from the first trip, and Jacob is sending them back for the second time, and he's giving them this advice. Now, it's kind of interesting. Why would you give it the advice for the second time? They've already been there.
Right.
As my friend Alex likes to say, that wouldn't make sense. They would have already been like evil-eyed. So why send them back and say, don't go through unless you get the evil eye? You've already been evil-eyed. You already went once.
It's too late to give them that advice.
So it doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
Well, very interestingly, the Midrash doesn't have him giving the advice before the second trip. It's before the first trip.
Right. Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So again, it's corroborating the Torah. It's based around that. It's not like how. So you know what Muslims are trying to say? Well, the Midrash, the Jews copied the Quran. And they like to say, well, they look at some of the Midrashic texts are post-Islamic in terms of when they were composed. But we also know that, okay, well, many of those things claim to be from earlier traditions, and they can go back very far. So we can't necessarily trace it all to exactly pinpoint when things started and stuff. But so they're going to say, so it was after, right? And we're going to say, okay. So the Jews copied the Quranic account. So they copied it's kind of strange to imagine the Jews copying the Quran. Okay. Mm-hmm. And they copied the Quran's account of the gates. So Jacob, but they didn't, because they have it on the first trip, before the first trip, not the second trip.
Right.
They didn't copy it. There's one very simple, good explanation for all of this. Muhammad was illiterate. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say that the actual scripture, the Torah, the Bible in Arabic didn't exist at the time in that region.
Yeah, but my point is, how are the stories all messed up like this in the Quran? He can't read it himself. He's not copying. A lot of Christians say it's plagiarism. It's not plagiarism. Plagiarism, you actually copy what's there and you get the same result, and you just didn't source it. You didn't cite it. This isn't plagiarism. This is like a bad copy of a bad copy of a bad copy.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's also an oral tradition oral tradition naturally has variance in it over time if you don't have a written account to store it eventually, like if you go long enough.
Okay.
So
go ahead. Sorry. I interrupted.
So I was just thinking, I think that he hears these stories, but he hears variations that have probably been influenced by Midrash or just variants that are maybe even local to the region, and he isn't able to tell that that's not actually what's written because he doesn't have access to it, or he can't read, or both.
Well, whether he can read or not at all, he can't read Hebrew.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So he doesn't have access to the Torah. So definitely he can't check it. So he's dependent upon, and even the Hadiths say that the Jews would bring Arabic translations to
And not to trust them.
Yeah, and then they don't trust them. And I think
Yeah.
the trust happens later. The mistrust happens later. It's not at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to show you. Can I show you one more story? Before
Can you do it in 10 minutes?
I'll try to be quick, okay? But there is a lot to it. But okay, so this is the story of Saul. Okay, it's a really crazy one though. Okay, so it's in Surah 2, verse 246 to 252. So I'm just going to summarize this verse because it's a long one. So basically, this is when they asked for a king. They asked Samuel for a king, and then he appoints Saul. Okay, so they asked for a king at 246, 247. I don't know. Can you make us at all any bigger? Because I kind of want to.
I can put you on the left like that.
There you go. That's good.
I just want to make sure the text is like legible so people can follow along.
I also just kind of want to see your reaction.
Oh, right. Okay.
Oh, yeah. So 247. Their prophet, right. So Samuel told them, Allah has appointed Saul to be your king. They protested. How can he be our king when some of us are more deserving of kingship than he, and he has not been blessed with vast riches? He replied, Allah has chosen him over you and blessed him with knowledge and stature. Allah grants kingship to whomever he wills. Allah is all bountiful and knowing. Their prophet further told them the sign of Saul's kingship. So in other words, they protested. So now here's proof God has chosen him.
Right.
Sign of Saul's kingship is that the ark will come to you, containing reassurance from your Lord and relics of the family of Moses and the family of Aaron, which will be carried by the angels. Surely in this is a sign for you if you truly believe. When Saul marched forth with his army, he cautioned, Allah will test you with a river. So whoever drinks his fill from it is not with me, and whoever does not taste it except a sip from the hollow of his hands is definitely with me. They all drank their fill except for a few. When he and the remaining faithful with him crossed the river, they said, now we're no match for Goliath and his warriors. But those believers who were certain they would meet Allah reasoned, how many times has a small force vanquished a mighty army by the will of Allah? And Allah is always with the steadfast. When they advanced to face Goliath and his warriors, they prayed, our Lord, shower us with perseverance, make our steps firm, and give us victory over the disbelieving people. So they defeated them by Allah's will, and David killed Goliath. And Allah blessed David with kingship and wisdom and taught him with what he willed. Had Allah not repelled a group of people by the might of another, corruption would have dominated the earth, and Allah is gracious to all. These are Allah's revelations, which we recite to you, O Prophet, in truth. You are truly one of the messengers.
These are Allah's revelations, which we recite to you. That's an interesting way of ending it.
Uh-huh. Now, did anything stand out to you in all of it?
Well, it's different from the biblical account.
Mm-hmm.
And so the ark stuff is also interesting to me.
Okay, yeah. What stands out about the ark?
The acknowledgement of it, but I'm thinking from a theology kind of point.
Forget theology.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else?
It's a sign. It's a sign for you, which is the ark, I think.
The ark's going to come to you, meaning it's returning.
Yeah.
When did the ark return?
The ark was gone at this point, right?
No.
No.
We're talking in the biblical narrative in Saul. In 1 Samuel, who captured the ark?
The Philistines?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. 1 Samuel chapter 4. The Philistines captured the ark. Okay. The people were rebellious. They brought it out into battle, and then they captured the ark, and then Eli falls over dead. chapter 5, plagues come upon them, right? And they decide in chapter 6, we got to get rid of it. It was there for 7 months. That's it. Okay. They sent it back. Blah, blah, blah. And it's brought to a place called Kiryat Jearim, back in Israel. They took up the ark, brought it into the house of Abinadab on the hill, and they consecrated it, his son Eleazar, to have charge of the ark of the Lord. From the day that the ark was lodged at Kiryat Jearim, a long time passed, some 20 years, and all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. Now, when did they ask for a king?
When did they?
When did they ask for a king relative to this passage?
I'm not sure. Off the top of my head.
The next chapter.
Okay.
So the ark has already returned for decades. And then they asked for a king.
right. I see. And this, of course, is
The
different from the
sign
Quranic understanding.
that Saul has been chosen after they rejected him is that the ark's going to come.
Right.
So
By the biblical account, it was already there.
It's backwards.
okay. It's also not given as a sign of Saul at all. Has nothing to
Yeah,
do with
those
Saul.
are relevant.
Okay, it's already been back. Now I want to ask you, 249. What is this?
I'm not sure about this bit.
This is
Hold
this
on.
is
Don't
Judges
say it.
7.
Don't say it.
Oh.
Did you say it?
Yeah, I heard what he said. Yeah, Judges 7.
Gideon. It's Gideon.
Gideon, right.
Okay. Hate to spoil it for you.
So Judges 7 says, it's important you see it. God said, the Lord said to Gideon, the people are too many for you, for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, my own hand has saved me. So God is kind of strange. He's saying, you have too many guys in your army because you're going to boast that you did it yourself. Okay. So he wants to narrow them down. So 10,000, narrows it down from 32,000 to 10,000. And then it says, the Lord said to Gideon, the people are still too many. Take them down to the water, and I will test them there for you there, whatever. And anyone of whom I say, this one shall go with you, etc. So he brought the people down to the water. Everyone who laps the water with his tongue, as a dog laps, you shall set by himself. Likewise, everyone who kneels down to drink. The number who lapped, putting their hands to their mouths, was 300 men. But all the rest of the people knelt down to drink water. So they're tested how they drink. It narrows them down. And what is the whole idea is that God will give victory even to a few, which is exactly what it says in the Quran. They're narrowed down, and they said, now we're no match for Goliath and his warriors, but the believers who were certain they'd meet God reasoned, how many times has a small force vanquished a mighty army?
So it's confusing two different accounts and
Exactly.
like merging them together.
Exactly. Because Gideon didn't fight Goliath. Right?
Well, yeah, sorry, yeah. So, for a second, I thought you were going to say that's in this text. I was like, well, I mean, because it's obviously referencing from it, it kind of like it is in the text, which is weird, but yeah.
Yeah, so Judges, I mean, Gideon was like, I don't know, 150 years before Saul. Okay, so we're talking, they're totally different times, merging it together, they're mixing it together. And all of it is Saul marched forth and went to the river, not Gideon.
Right.
So all the stuff about Gideon is applied to Saul. And I mean, do you remember in 1 Samuel 17, did Saul march his army forward to fight Goliath?
Did Saul march his army forth to fight Goliath?
I mean, when they're going to fight Goliath and the Philistines,
yeah,
who is brave enough to go to fight them? Is it Saul?
Well, it's David who goes to Saul and takes a weapon, right? No, he takes his armor or something.
Yeah, and then it doesn't fit, and then he goes with his sling, right?
That's it, right.
But the point is, Saul is terrified. He won't fight.
Right.
Nobody will fight. Only David will fight. David goes one-on-one. This is David is in the midst of the army and he kills Goliath while they're all fighting.
Right.
That's total opposite. Right? Like you can't just say,
Yeah.
oh yeah, they just changed it a little bit. Saul went and look, Saul is the hero here. Saul is the one so brave, he's willing to march forth with a small amount of men.
So
and trust in God.
Like you compared before to Surah 12, ayah 111, I think it was.
Yeah.
Where it says, look, it's these stories, their confirmation of these stories and in detail, like the Quran is meant to be confirmed them in detail. And then you're pointing out that the detail for apparently no reason is substantially different.
So different, right? So
and there's no way of reconciling it with intent. Like, why would the children of Israel change those stories seemingly for no apparent reason other than just to confuse people or to just give a different account for the sake of it? That's not a good answer. And so it's not the case, basically. It just isn't probable. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Also, it's not only that. What was the reason? Like, go back. How did they respond when he was presented to them? They protested Saul.
Yeah, they didn't want to accept that.
Did they
and then
protest when Saul was presented as king to the Israelites in 1 Samuel? Did they protest?
Not that I remember.
They didn't.
Right.
Okay. They said, "Long live the king."
Mm-hmm. They rejoiced.
And what were the reasons they protest according to the Quran? Some of us are more deserving than him.
Yeah.
Well, that's the opposite.
Oh, he isn't rich.
Like the ideal king in 1 Samuel.
Right.
And he has not been blessed with vast riches. What does it say in 1 Samuel 9? It says there was a man of Benjamin whose name was king. He's the son of, etc., a man of wealth. And his son was Saul.
Right. Okay.
Okay. I'll leave you with this. Look at what it says in Ibn Kathir's comment on, remember that verse at the end? It says, these are the signs of Allah. These are the verses of like that God has revealed to you, like and you're a prophet. Look, these are the verses of Allah we recite to you, Muhammad, in truth. Surely you are one of the messengers. This ayah states, these ayat of Allah, meaning those verses, right, that we have narrated to you in truth conform to the exact manner that the stories have occurred and to the truth that still remain in the divine books that the scholars of the children of Israel have and know.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Oh, wait. Conform. We have narrated to you truth, conform to the exact manner that these stories have occurred. Oh, man.
Look at Al-Razi. Okay, what does he say? There are several mention of stories of the blah blah blah. Here it is. Meaning, with the certainty that the people of the book do not doubt, because it is in their books. Likewise, without any difference at all.
The trickle down.
Okay. Oh, that is very very potent. That is, yeah. Man, I am gonna have to wrap up because I have other things I need to go to. But first of all, I actually want to give a shout out to your channels. Like, where can people find you if they want to know more? I think that's
yeah.
I
mean, I do have a channel. I haven't been making videos because I used to do it with someone else who edited it. But you can. I'd love for subscribers. One day I'll start doing more videos. But until all here is my channel. But I would say go subscribe to Sharik too, because I'm going to be doing lots of live streams with him, and we're going to be doing content about this stuff on that channel. And it's just your name, right? Is your channel?
Yeah. So the YouTube channel is just my name, just Sharik Khan. You can find me pretty easily. And then Instagram and TikTok for short form stuff, just to keep this fresh in your guys' mind. We're going for like a full fire hose approach, like constant exposure. And then school.com/Christ is our like in-depth discipleship community. We have 4,000 people on that now, all learning the master key, and we have live calls in there where it's a lot more interactive, a lot more like, hey, I'm delivering the master key to my devout father and I need some coaching in real time. We have that resource as well, and everything is completely free.
Yeah, and that is it's, you know, in that context it's more private because it's not going out on YouTube.
Yeah.
So that stuff, but we're live streaming on his channel, and I really encourage, if you want to get trained on Master Key, join on the school app, SKOOL, if you're just listening. And one more thing is Alex's channel. He's the guy who started it all. Okay, so would love his channel to grow more. He has both Russian and English videos. So his channel's his name, Alex Kerimli, Kerimli. And maybe
I'll put
we can put that in the
links
description.
in the chat. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate.
No worries. This is like, there's a lot here, and there's actually been people in the chat. I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't been able to look at the chat.
Okay. They're like defending a lion mentioned that because we're part of a Discord group where we're going through this. We don't look at it in the same way you guys do, but I think we might pay more attention to it, or at least I will, because I think this is very I think this is good. I think this is really, really good, and I think this is very convincing. So I'm gonna you've kind of like made me think of other things, and that's really awesome.
Oh yeah. Well, honestly, there's so much area to research too. So if people want to research in this area, just sticking to the stories and the Midrash, there's so much Midrash to study as well. So would love to connect with you. You can connect with us through those platforms. And thank you again, Chris.
Yeah, God bless you all. Thank you guys for being on the panel and for giving the talk. I think it's been really edifying for everyone who's listening. And God bless you all for watching. And we will see you all in the next one.
All right.
Yeah, God bless you all.
Take care.